Chapter 9 of The Worm Ouroboros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jason Mills. The Worm Ouroboros by E.R. Edisson. Chapter 9. Salapanta Hills. Of the landing of Lord Juss and his companions in Outer Impland, and their meeting with Zeldornius, Helteranius, and Jalcanius Faustus, and of the tidings told by Mivarsh, and the dealings of the three great captains on the hills of Salapanta. On the 31st day after that council held in Crothering, the fleet of Demonland put to sea from Looking Haven, 11 dragons of war and 2 great ships of burthen, bound for the uttermost seas of earth in quest of the Lord Goldry Blusco. 1800 demons fared on that expedition, and not a man among them that was not a complete soldier. For 5 days they rode southaway on a windless sea, and on the 6th the sea cliffs of Goblinland came out of the haze on their starboard bow. They rode south along the land, and on the 10th day out from Looking Haven passed under the Ness of Ozam, journeying thence 4 days with a favouring wind over the open seas to Cibrion. But now, when they had rounded that dark promontory, and were about steering east along the coast of Impland the Moor, and less than 10 days' journey lay betwixt them and their haven in Muelva, a dismal tempest suddenly surprised them. For 40 days it swept them in hail and sleet over wide wallowing ocean, without a star, without a course, till on a fierce midnight of wind and darkness and roaring waters was Juss's and Spitfire's ship, and other 4 in her company, driven on the rocks on a lee shore and broken in pieces. Hardly, and after long battling among great waves, those brethren won ashore, weary and hurt. In the inhospitable light of a wet and windy dawn they mustered on the beach such of their folk as had escaped out of the mouth of destruction, and there were 333. Spitfire, beholding these things, spake and said, This land hath a villainous look stirreth my remembrance, as but to behold verjuice soureth the mouth of him who once tasted thereof. Rememberest thou this land? Just scanned the low long coastline that swept north and west to an estuary, and beyond ran westwards till it was lost in the scud and driving spray. Desolate birds flew above the welter of the surges. He said, Certainly this is Arlen Mouth, where least of all I had choose to come a land with so small a head of men. Yet shalt thou prove here, as it hath ever been, how all occasions are but steps for us to climb fame by. Our ship is lost, cried Spitfire, and the more part of our men, and worst of all Brandok Har that is worth 10,000. Easilier shall a little ant bib this ocean dry, than shall we in this taking perform our enterprise. And he cursed and blasphemed, saying, Cursed be the malice of the sea, which, having broke our power, now speweth us ashore here to our mere undoing, and so hath done great succour to the king of Witchland, and unto all the world beside great damage. But Juss answered him, Think not that these contrary winds come of fortune, or by the influence of malignant and combustive stars. This weather bloweth out of Carse. Even as these very waves thou beholdest have each his backwash or undertow, so followeth after every sending an undertow of evil hap, whereby, albeit in essence a less deadly thing, many have been drowned and washed away, who stood unremoved against the main stroke of the breaker. So were we twice since that day brought near to our bane. First, when, our judgment being darkened with a strange distraction, we went up with Gazlark against Carse. Next, when this storm wrecked us here by Arlen Mouth. Though by mine art I rebated the king's sending, yet against the maleficial undertow that followed it my charms avail not, nor the virtues of all sorcerous herbs that grow. Are these things so, and wilt thou yet be temperate? Said Spitfire. Content thee, said Juss. The sands run down. A certain time only runneth this stream for our hurt. It must now have well nigh spent itself, and it were too perilous for him to conjure a second time, as last May he conjured in Carse. Who told thee that? Asked Spitfire. I do but conjecture it, answered he, from my studying of certain prophetic writings touching the princes of that blood and line, whereby it appeareth, yet not clearly but riddle-wise, that if one and the same king, essaying a second time in his own person an enterprise in that kind, should fail, and the powers of darkness destroy him, then is not his life spilt alone, as it fortuned aforetime unto Garais the Seventh at his first attempt, but there shall be an end for ever of the whole house of Garais, which hath for so many generations reigned in Carse. Well, said Spitfire, so stand we to our chance. Old Muck Hills will bloom at last. Now for 19 days fared those brethren and their company eastward through outer Impland, first across a country of winding sleepy rivers and reedy lakes innumerable, then by rolling uplands and champaign ground. At length, on an even, they came upon a heath running up eastward to a range of tumbled hills. The hills were not lofty nor steep, but rugged of outline, and their surface rough with crags and boulders, so that it was a maze of little eminences and valleys, grown upon by heather and fern and rank sad-coloured grass, with stunted thorn trees and junipers harbouring in the clefts of the rocks. On the watershed, as on an horse's withers, looking west to the red October sunset, and south to the far line of the Dardonian Sea, they came upon a spy fortalice, old and desolate, and one sitting in the gate. For very joy their hearts melted within them, when they knew him for none other than Brandok de Ha. So they embraced him, as one beyond hope risen from the grave. And he said, Through the straits of Malikafkaz was I borne, and wrecked at last on the lonely shore 10 leagues southward from this spot, whither I won alone, having lost my ship and all my dear companions. In my mind it was that ye must fare by this road to Muelva, if ye suffered shipwreck in the outer coasts of Impland. Hearken, he said, and I will tell you a wonder. A 7 night have I awaited you in this roosting stead of daws and owls, and it is a caravanserai of great armies that pass by in the wilderness, and having parleyed with 2, I await the 3rd. For well I think that here I have made discovery of a great mystery, one that hath engaged the speculations of wise men for years. For on that day of my coming hither, when sunset was red as now you see it, behold an army marching up from the east, with great flags a-flaunting in the wind, and all kinds of music. Which I beholding, methought, if these be enemies, then goeth down my life's days with honour, and if friends, then cometh provender from those waggons of burthen that follow this army. A weighty argument, since not so much as the smell of victuals had I, save nasty nuts and berries of the open field, since I came forth of the sea. So went I, taking my weapons, on the walls of this spy fortalice, and hailed them, bidding them say forth their quality. And he that was their captain rode up under the walls, and hailed me with all courtesy and noble port. And who think ye 'twas? They answered not. One that hath been famous, said he, up and down the earth for a marvellous, valorous, and brave soldier of fortune. Have ye forgot the enterprise of Gazlark, that had its burying in Impland? Was he little and dark? Asked Just, like a keen dagger suddenly unsheathed at midnight? Or bright with the splendour of a pen and spear at a jousting on high holiday? Or was he dangerous of aspect like an old sword, rusty in the midst, but bright at point and edge, brought forth for deeds of destiny at the fated day? Thine arrow striketh in the triple ring of the mark, said Lord Brandok de Ha. Great of growth he was, and a very peacock of splendour in his panoply of war, and a great pitch-black stallion bare him. So I spake him fair, saying, O most magnificent and godlike Helpteranius, conqueror in 100 fights, what makest thou these long years in outer Impland with this great head of men? And what dark lodestone draws you these 9 years, since with great sound of trumpets and tramp of horses, thou and Zeldonius and Jalcanius Faustus went forth to make Impland Gazlark's footstool, since which time all the world believeth you lost and dead? And he beheld me with alien eyes, and made answer, O Brandok de Ha, the world journeyeth to its silly will, but I fare alway with my purpose before me. Be it 9 years, or but 9 moons, or 9 ages, what care I? Zeldonius would I encounter, and engage him in battle, that still fleeth before my face. Eat and drink with me tonight, but think not to detain me, nor to turn me to idle thoughts beside my purpose, for with the dawning of the day I must forth again in quest of Zeldonius. So I ate and drank, and was merry that night with Helpteranius, in his pavilion of silk and gold. And with the dawn he marshalled his army, and marched westward toward the plains. And on the 3rd day, as I sat without this wall, cursing your slow coming, behold an army marching from the east, and one leading them mounted on a small dun horse. And he was clad in black armour shining like the raven's wing, with black eagle's plumes in his helm, and eyes like the eyes of a cat-a-mountain, full of sparkling flame. Little was he, and fierce of face, and lithe and hard to look on, and tireless to look on, like a stoat. And I hailed him from where I sat, saying, O most notable and puissant Jalcanius Faustus, shatterer of the hosts of men, whitherward over the lonely heaths forlorn, thou and thy great armament? And he lighted down from his horse, and took me by the arms with both his hands, and said, If a man dream, To speak with dead men betokens profit. And art not thou of the dead, O Brandok the Har? For in forgotten days, that now spring up in my mind as flowers in a weed-choked garden after many years, so bloomest thou in my memory, great among the great ones of the world that was, thou and thine house in Crothering above the sea locks in many-mountain demon-land. But oblivion, like a sounding sea, soundeth betwixt me and those days. And the noise of the surf stoppeth mine ears, and the mist of the sea darkeneth mine eyes that strain for a sight of those far times and the deeds thereof. Yet for those dead days' sake, eat with me and drink with me tonight, since here for a night once more I pitch my moving tent on Salapanta hills, and tomorrow I fare onward. For never may rest bring balm to my soul until I find out Helteranius and smite his head from his shoulders. Great shame to him, but little marvel is it, that he still courseth before me as an hare. For traitors were ever dastards, and who ever heard tell of a more hellish, devilish, damned traitor than he? 9 years ago, when Zeldornius and I made ready to decide our quarrels by battle, word came to me in a lucky hour how that this Helteranius with cunning Colyabrine, and malice viperine, and slight serpentine, went about to attack me in the rear. So turned I right about to crush him, but the fat chuff-cat was fled. So spake Jalcanius Faustus, and I ate and drank with him that night, and caroused with him in his tent, and at break of day he struck camp and rode west away with his army. Brandok the Har ceased, and looked eastward toward the gates of night, and lo, an army faring up from the lower moorlands, toward them on the ridge, horsemen and footmen in dense array, and their captain on a great brown horse riding in the van. Long-limbed he was and lean, all armed in dusty, rusty armour, hacked and dinted in 100 fights, with worn leather gauntlets on his hands, and a faded campaigning cloak thrown back from his shoulders. He carried his casque at his saddle-bow, and his head was bare, the head of an old lean hunting dog, with white hair swept back from a rugged brow where blue veins showed, great-nosed and bony-faced, with huge bushy white mustachios and eyebrows, and blue eyes gleaming from cavernous eye-sockets. His horse was cursed-looking, with ears laid back, and bloodshed dangerous eyes, and he in the saddle sat erect and unyielding as a lance. When he and his army came up upon the ridge, he drew rein and hailed the demons. And he said, On every 9th day these 9 years have I beheld this lonely place of earth, as I pursued after Jalcanius Faustus, that still eludeth me, and still fleeth before me. And this is strange, since he was ever a great fighter, and engaged these 9 years past to do battle with me. And now fear cometh upon me that eld draweth a veil of illusion athwart mine eyes, portending the approach of death or ever I perform my will. For here in the uncertain light of evening rise up before me shapes and semblances, as of guests of Gazloik the king in Zagisaculo in days gone by, old friends of Gazloik's out of many mountain demon-land, Brandok the Har that slew the king of Witchland, and Spitfire of Owlswick, and Juss his brother, the same which had lordship over all the demons ere we fared to Impland. Ghosts and back corners of a world forgot. But if ye be right flesh and blood, speak and discover yourselves. Juss answered him, O most redoubtable Zeldornius, and in war invincible, well might a man expect spirits of the dead on these quiet hills about cockshut time. And if thou deem as such, how much more shall we, that be wanderers new shipwrecked out of hungry seas, suppose thee but a shade, and these great hosts of thine but fetches of the dead that be departed, steaming up from Erebus as daylight dies? O most renowned and redoubtable Zeldornius, said Brandok the Har, thou wast once my guest in Crothering. To resolve thy doubts and ours, bid us to supper. It were matter indeed if spirits bodiless were able to bib wine and eat up earthly bake-meats. So Zeldornius let pitch his tents, and appointed the 5th hour before midnight for those lords of Demonland to sup with him. Ere they foregathered in Zeldornius's tent, they spake among themselves, and Spitfire said, Was ever such a wonder, or such a pitiful trick of the fates, as bringeth these 3 great captains to waste the remnant of their days in this remote wilderness? Doubt not but there's practice in it, that maketh them march these long years this changeless round, each fleeing one that would fain encounter him, and still seeking another that flies before him. Never went man with that look of the eyes Zeldornius hath, said Juss, but he was a man ensorcelled. With such a look, said Brandok the Har, went Helteranius and Jalcanius. But mark our interest. 'Twere good to break the charm and claim their help for our pains. Shall show the old lion all the truth of this fact tonight? So spake Lord Brandok the Har, and those 3 deemed his counsel good. So at supper when men's hearts were gladdened with good cheer, the Lord just sate him down by Zeldonius, and opened to him this matter, saying, O renowned Zeldonius, how befalleth it that these 9 years thou pursuest after Jalcanius Faustus, shatterer of hosts, and what was your difference betwixt you that set you by the ears? Zeldonius said, O Jus, must I answer thee by reasons in this matter that is ruled by the high stars and fate that lays men at their length? Enough for thee that unpeace befell betwixt me and Jalcanius mighty in war, and it was confirmed between us that by the arbitrament of the bloody field we should end our difference. But he abode me not, and these 9 years I seek to meet with him in vain. There was a third of you, said Jus. What tidings hast thou of Helteranius? Zeldonius answered him, No tidings. Wilt thou, said Jus, that I enlighten thee hereon? Zeldonius said, Thou and thy fellows alone of the children of men have spoken with me since these things began. For they that dwelt in this region fled years ago, accounting the place accursed. A paltry crew they were, and mean meat enow for our swords. Speak then, if thou meanest me well, and show me all. Helteranius, said Lord Jus, pursueth thee these 9 years, as thou pursuest Jalcanius Faustus. My cousin here hath seen him but 6 days ago, in this same place, and talked with him, and shook him by the hand, and knew his mind. Surely ye be all 3 holden by some enchantment, that being old comrades in arms, so strangely and to so little purpose, do pursue each the other's life. I prithee, let us be a mean betwixt you all to set you at one again, and free you from so strange a thraldom. But with those words spoken was Zeldonius grown red as blood. In a while he said it were black treachery. I'll not credit it. But Lord Brandok de Ha answered him, From his own lips I received it, O Zeldonius, and thereto I plight my troth. This besides, that Jalcanius Faustus was turned from battling with thee 9 years ago, as he himself hath told me, and made firm his saying with most fearful oaths, by intelligence brought him that Helteranius was in that hour minded to take him in the rear. Ay, said Spitfire, and unto this day he marcheth on Helteranius' track as thou on his. With those words spoken was Zeldonius grown yellow as old parchment, and his white mustachios bristled like a lion's. He sat silent a while, then, resting upon Jus the cold and steady gaze of his blue eyes, The world comes back to me, he said, and this memory therewith, that they of Demonland were truth-tellers, whether to friend or foe, and ever held it shame to cog and lie. All they bowed gravely, and he said with a great lowe of anger in his eyes, This Helteranius deviseth against me, it well appeareth, the self-same treachery, whereof he was falsely accused to Jalcanius Faustus. There were no likelier place to crush him than here on Salapanta Ridge. If I stand here to abide his onset, the lie of the ground befriendeth me, and Jalcanius cometh at his heels to gather the broken meats after I have made my feast. Brandok de Ha said in Jus's ear, Our peacemaking taketh a pretty turn, heels o' the air, monstrous and ladylike. But naught they could say would move Zeldonius, so in the end they offered him their backing in this adventure. And when the day is won, then shalt thou lend us thy might in our enterprise, and aid us in our wars with Witchland that be for to come. But Zeldonius said, O Jus, and ye lords of Demonland, I yield you thanks, but ye shall not meddle in this battle. For we came 3 captains with our hosts unto this land, and beheld the land and laid it under us. Ours it is, and if any meddle or make with us, where we never so set at enmity one with another, we must join together in his despite and bring him to bane. Be still then, and behold and see what birth fate shall bring forth on Salapanta hills. But if I live, thereafter shall ye have my friendship and my help in all your enterprises whatsoever. For a while he sat without speech, his stark veined hands clenched on the board before him. Then, rising, went without word to the door of his pavilion to study the night. Then turned he back to Lord Jus and spake to him, Know that when this moon now past was but 3 days old, I began to be troubled with a catarrh or rheum which yet troubleth me, and well thou wottest that whoso falleth sick on the 3rd day of the moon's age, he will die. To-night also is a new moon, and of a Saturday, and that betokeneth fighting and bloodshed. Also the wind bloweth from the south, and he that beginneth that game with the south wind shall have the victory. With such uncertain blackness and brightness openeth the door of fate before me. Jus bowed his head, and said, O Zeldonius, thy speech is sooth. I was ever a fighter, said Zeldonius. Far into the night sat they in the tent of renowned Zeldonius, drinking and talking of life and destiny and old wars, and the chances of war and great adventure, and an hour after midnight they parted, and Juss and Spitfire and Brandok Dahar betook them to their rest in the watch-tower on the ridge of Salapanta. On such wise passed 3 days by, Zeldonius waiting with his army on the hill, and the demons supping with him nightly. And on the 3rd day he drew out his army, as for battle, expecting Heltoranius. But neither that day, nor the next day following, brought sight nor tidings of Heltoranius, and strange it seemed to them, and hard to guess, what turn of fortune had delayed his coming. The 6th night was overcast, and murk darkness covered the earth. When supper was done, as the demons betook themselves to their sleeping place, they heard a scuffle, and the voice of Brandok Dahar, who went foremost of them, crying, "Here have I caught a heath-dog's whelp. Give me a light. What shall I do with him?" Men were roused and lights brought, and Brandok Dahar surveyed that which he held pinioned by the arms, caught by the entrance to the fortalice, one with scared wild-beast eyes and a swart face, golden ear-rings in his ears, and a thick, close-cropped beard interlaced with gold wire twisted among its curls. Bare-armed, with a tunic of otter-skin, and wide hairy trousers cross-stitched with silver thread, a circlet of gold on his head, and frizzled dark hair plaited in 2 thick tails that hung forward over his shoulders. His lips were drawn back, like a cross-grained dog's, snarling betwixt fear and fierceness, and his white pointed teeth and the whites of his eyes flashed in the torchlight. So they had him with him then into the tower, and set him before them, and just said, "Fear not, but tell forth unto us thy name and lineage, and what brings thee lurking in the night about our lodging. We mean thee no hurt, so thou practise not against us and our safety. Art thou a dweller in this impland, or a wanderer like as we be, from countries beyond the seas? Hast thou companions? And if so, where be they, and what, and how many?" And the stranger gnashed upon them with his teeth, and said, "O devils transmarine, mock not but slay." Juss entreated him kindly, giving him meat and drink, and in a while made question of him once more, "What is thy name?" Whereto he replied, "O devil transmarine, pity of thine ignorance, sith thou knowst not Mivarsh Faz." And he fell into a great passion of weeping, crying aloud, "Woe worth the woe that is fallen upon all the land of Impland." "What's the matter?" said Juss. But Mivarsh ceased not to wail and to lament, saying, "Out harrow and alas for Fax Fe Faz, and Ilarosh Faz, and Lermesh Faz, and Gandasa Faz, and all the great ones in the land." And when they would have questioned him, he cried again, "Curse ye bitterly Filpritz Faz, which betrayed us into the hand of the devil Ultramontane in the castle of Orpish." "What devil is this thou speakest of?" asked Juss. "He hath come," he answered, "over the mountains out of the north country, that alone was able to answer Fax Fe Faz, and the voice of his speech is like unto the roaring of a bull." "Out of the north?" said Juss, giving him more wine, and exchanging glances with Spitfire and Brandok Dahar. "I would hear more of this." Mivarsh drank and said, "O devils transmarine, ye give me strong waters which comfort my soul, and ye speak me soft words. But shall I not fear soft words? Soft words were spoke by this devil Ultramontane, when he and cursed Filpritz spake soft words unto us in Orpish, unto me and unto Fax Fe Faz, and Gandasa and Ilarosh, and unto all of us, after our overthrow in battle against him by the banks of Arlen." Juss asked, "Of what fashion is he to look on?" "He hath a great yellow beard beflecked with grey," said Mivarsh, "and a bold shiny pate, and standeth big as a neat." Juss spake apart to Brandok Dahar, "There's matter in it, if this be true." And Brandok Dahar poured forth unto Mivarsh, and bade him drink again, saying, "O Mivarsh Faz, we be strangers and guests in wide-flung Impland. Be it known to thee that our power is beyond ken, and our wealth transcendeth the imagination of man. Yet is our benevolence of like measure with our power and riches, overflowing as honey from our hearts, unto such as receive us openly, and tell us that which is. Only be warned, that if any lie to us, or assay craftily to delude us, not the manticores that lodge beyond the Maruna were more dreadful to that man than we." Mivarsh quailed, but answered him, "Use me well, you were best, and you shall hear from me naught but what is true. First with the sword he vanquished us, and then with subtle words invited us to talk with him in Orpish, pretending friendship. But they are all dead that hearkened to him. For when he held them closed up in the council room in Orpish, himself went secretly forth, while his men laid hands on Gandasa Faz, and on Ilarosh Faz, and on Fax Fe Faz that was greatest amongst us, and on Lermesh Faz, and cut off their heads and set them up on poles without the gate. And our armies that waited without were dismayed to see the heads of the Fazes of Impland so set on poles, and the armies of the devils Ultramontane still threatening us with death. And this big, bald, bearded devil spake them of Impland fair, saying these that he had slain were their oppressors, and he would give them their heart's desire if they would be his men, and he would make them free, every man, and share out all Impland amongst them. So were the common sort befooled, and brought under by this bold devil from beyond the mountains, and now none withstandeth him in all Impland. But I that had held back from his counsel in Orpish, fearing his guile, hardly escaped from my folk that rose against me, and I fled into the woods and wildernesses. Where last saw ye him? Asked Juss. Mivarsh answered him, a 3 days' journey northwest of this, at Tormerish in Achary. What made he there? Asked Juss. Mivarsh answered, still devising evil. Against whom? Asked Juss. Mivarsh answered, against Zeldonius, which is a devil transmarine. Give me some more wine, said Juss, and fill again a beaker for Mivarsh Faz. I do love naught so much as tale-telling o' nights. With whom devised he against Zeldonius? Mivarsh answered, with another devil from beyond seas. I have forgot his name. Drink and remember, said Juss, or if 'tis gone from thee, paint me his picture. He hath about my bigness, said Mivarsh, that was little of stature. His eyes be bright, and he somewhat favoureth this one, pointing at Spitfire, though belike he hath not all so fierce a face. He is lean-faced and dark of skin. He goeth in black iron. Is he Jalcanias Faustus? Asked Juss, and Mivarsh answered, Aye. There's musk and amber in thy speech, said Juss. I must have more of it. What mean they to do? This, said Mivarsh. As I sat listening in the dark without their tent, it was made absolute that this Jalcanias had been deceived in supposing that another devil transmarine, whom men call Helteranius, had been minded to do treacherously against him, whereas, as the bold devil made him believe, 'twas no such thing. And so it was concluded that Jalcanias should send riders after Helteranius to make peace between them, and that they two should forthwith join to kill Zeldonius, one falling on him in the front, and the other in the rear. So 'tis come to this, said Spitfire. And when they have Zeldonius slain, said Mivarsh, then must they help this bold pate in his undertakings. And so pay him for his reeds, said Juss, and Mivarsh answered, even so. One more thing I would know, said Juss. How great a following hath he in Impland? The greatest strength that he can make, answered Mivarsh, of devils Ultramontane, is, as I think, 200. Many imps beside will follow him, but they have but our country weapons. Lord Brandok de Hart took Juss by the arm and went forth with him into the night. The frosty grass crunched under their tread. Strange stars blinked in the south in a windy space betwixt cloud and sleeping earth. Achenar near the meridian bedimming all lesser fires with his pure radiance. So cometh Corund upon us as an eagle out of the sightless blue, said Brandok de Hart, with 12 times our forces, to let us the weight of the Maruna, and all Impland like a spaniel smiling at his heel, if indeed this simple soul say true, as I think he doth. Thou fallest all of a holiday mood, said Juss, at the first scenting of this great hazard. O Juss, cried Brandok de Hart, thine own breath lighteneth at it, and thy words come more sprightly forth. Are not all lands, all airs, one country to us, so there be great doings afoot to keep bright our swords? Juss said, ere we sleep I will inform Zeldonius how the wind shifteth. He must face both ways now, till this field be cut. This battle must not go against him, for his enemies be engaged, if Mivarsh say true, to give the help of their swords to Corund. So fared they to Zeldonius' tent. And Juss said by the way, of this be satisfied. Corund beareth not blade on the hills of Salapanta. The king hath intelligencers to keep him advertised of all enchanted circles of the world, and well he knoweth what influences move here, and with what danger to themselves outlanders draw sword here, as witness the doom fulfilled these 9 years by these 3 captains. Therefore will Corund, instructed in these things by his master that sent him, look to deal with us otherwhere than in this charmed corner of the earth, and he were as well take a bear by the tooth as meddle in the fight that now impendeth, and so bring upon him these 3 seasoned armies joined in one for his destruction. They passed the guard with the watchword, and waked Zeldonius and told him all. And he, muffled in his great faded cloak, went forth to see guards were set, and all sure against an onslaught from either side. And standing by his tent to give good night to those lords of Demonland, he said, It likes me better so. I ever was a fighter. So, one fight more. The morrow dawned and passed uneventful, and the morrow's morrow. But on the third morning after the coming of Mivarch, behold, east and west, great armies marching from the plains, and Zeldonius' array drawn up to meet them on the ridge, with weapons gleaming and horses champing, and trumpets blowing the call of battle. No greetings were betwixt them, nor so much as a message of challenge or defiance, but Jalcanias with his black riders rushed to the onset from the west, and Helteranius from the east. But Zeldonius, like a grey old wolf, snapping now this way, now that, stemmed the tide of their onslaught. So began the battle great and fell, and continued the livelong day. Thrice on either side Zeldonius went forth with a great strength of chosen men, insomuch that his enemies fled before him as the partridge doth before the sparrow-hawk. And thrice did Helteranius, and thrice Jalcanias Faustus, rally and hurl him back, mounting the ridge anew. But when it drew near to evening, and the dark day darkened toward night, the battle ceased, dying down suddenly into silence. Those lords of Demonland came down from their tower, and walked among the heaps of dead men slain, toward a piece of slabby rock in the neck of the ridge. Here, alone on that field, Zeldonius leaned upon his spear, gazing downward in a study, his arm cast about the neck of his old brown horse, who hung his head and sniffed the ground. Through a rift in the western clouds the sun glared forth, but his beams were not so red as the Lingen bent of Salapanta Field. As Juss and his companions drew near, no sound was heard save from the fortalice behind them, a discordant plucking of a harp, and the voice of Mivarch where he walked and harped before the walls, singing this ditty: The hag is astride this night for to ride, the devil and she together, through thick and through thin, now out and then in, though ne'er so foul be the weather. A thorn or a burr she takes for a spur, with a lash of a bramble she rides now, through brakes and through briars, o'er ditches and mires, she follows the spirit that guides now. No beast for his food dares now range the wood, but hushed in his lair he lies lurking, while mischiefs by these, on land and on seas, at noon of night are a-working. The storm will arise, and trouble the skies, this night and more for the wonder. The ghost from the tomb affrighted shall come, called out by the clap of the thunder. When they were come to Zeldonius, the Lord Juss spake, saying, O most redoubtable Zeldonius, renowned in war, surely thy prognostications by the moon were true. Behold the noble victory thou hast obtained upon thine enemies. But Zeldonius answered him not, still gazing downwards before his feet. And there was Helteranius fallen, the sword of Jalcanias Faustus standing in his heart, and his right hand grasping still his own sword that had given Jalcanias his bane-sore. So looked they awhile on those two great captains slain. And Zeldonius said, Speak not comfortably to me of victory, O Juss. So long as that sword, and that had his master alive, I did not more desire mine own safety than their destruction, who with me in days gone by made conquest of wide inland. And see with what a poisoned violence they laboured my undoing, and in what an unexpected ruin are they suddenly broken and gone. And as one grown into a deep sadness, he said, Where were all heroical parts but in Helteranius? And a man might make a garment for the moon, sooner than fit the o'erleaping actions of great Jalcanias, who now leaveth but his body to bedung that earth that was lately shaken at his terror. I have waded in red blood to the knee, and in this hour, in my old years, the world is become for me a vision only, and a mock show. Therewith he looked on the demons, and there was that in his eyes that stayed their speech. In a while he spake again, saying, I swear unto you my furtherance if I prevailed, but now is mine army passed away as wax wasteth before the fire, and I wait the dark ferryman who tarrieth for no man. Yet since never have I wrote mine obligations in sandy, but in marble memories, and since victory is mine, receive these gifts. And first thou, O Brandok Dahar, my sword, since before thou wast of years 18 thou wast accounted the mightiest among men-at-arms. Mightily may it avail thee, as me in time gone by. And unto thee, O Spitfire, I give this cloak. Old it is, yet may it stand thee in good stead, since this virtue it hath, that he who weareth it shall not fall alive into the hands of his enemies. Wear it for my sake. But unto thee, O Juss, give I no gift, for rich thou art of all good gifts. Only my good will give I unto thee, ere earth gape for me. So they thanked him well. And he said, Depart from me, since now approacheth that which must complete this day's undoing. So they fared back to the spy fortalice, and night came down on the hills. A great wind moaning out of the hueless west tore the clouds as a ragged garment, revealing the lonely moon that fled naked betwixt them. As the demons looked backward in the moonlight to where Zeldonius stood gazing on the dead, a noise as of thunder made the firm land tremble, and drowned the howling of the wind. And they beheld how earth gaped for Zeldonius. After that, the dark shut down athwart the moon, and night and silence hung on the field of Salapanta. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 of The Worm Ouroboros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jason Mills. The Worm Ouroboros by E.R. Edisson. Chapter 10. The Marchlands of the Maruna. Of the journey of the demons from Salapanta to Eshgrar-Ogo, wherein is set down concerning the lady of Ishne-Namatra, and other notable matters. Mivarsh Faz came betimes on the morrow to the lords of Demonland, and found them ready for the road. So he asked them where their journey lay, and they answered, East. Eastward, said Mivarsh, all ways lead to the Maruna. None may go thither and not die. But they laughed and answered him, Do not too narrowly define our power, sweet Mivarsh, restraining it to thy capacities. Know that our journey is a matter determined of, and it is fixed with nails of diamond to the wall of inevitable necessity. They took leave of him and went their ways with their small army. For 4 days they journeyed through deep woods, carpeted with the leaves of 1,000 autumns, where at midmost noon twilight dwelt among hushed woodland noises, and solemn eyeballs glared nightly between the tree trunks, gazing on the demons as they marched or took their rest. The 5th day, and the 6th, and the 7th, they journeyed by the southern margin of a gravelly sea, made all of sand and gravel, and no drop of water, yet ebbing and flowing away with great waves, as another sea doth, never standing still and never at rest. And always by day and night, as they came through the desert, was a great noise very hideous, and a sound as it were of tambourines and trumpets. Yet was the place solitary to the eye, and no living thing afoot there, save their company faring to the east. On the 8th day they left the shore of that waterless sea, and came by broken rocky ground to the descent to a wide vale, shelterless and unfruitful, with the broad stony bed of a little river winding in the strath. Here, looking eastward, they beheld in the lustre of a late bright shining sun a castle of red stone, on a terrace of the fellside beyond the valley. Just said, We can be there before nightfall, and there we will take guesting. When they drew near, they were ware, betwixt sunset and moonlight, of one sitting on a boulder in their path, about a furlong from the castle, as if gazing on them, and awaiting their coming. But when they came to the boulder there was no such person. So they passed on their way toward the castle, and when they looked behind them, lo, there was he sitting on the boulder, bearing his head in his hands, a strange thing which would cause any man to abhor. The castle gate stood open, and they entered in, and so by the courtyard to a great hall, with the board set as for a banquet, and bright fires, and 100 candles burning in the still air. But no living thing was there to be seen, nor voice heard in all that castle. Lord Brandok Dahar said, In this land to fail of marvels only for an hour were the strangest marvel. Banquet we lightly, and so to bed. So they sat down and ate, and drank of the honey-sweet wine, till all thoughts of war and hardship, and the unimagined perils of the wilderness, and Corin's great army preparing their destruction, faded from their minds, and the spirit of slumber wooed their weary frames. Then a faint music, troublous in its voluptuous wild sweetness, floated on the air, and they beheld a lady enter on the dais. Beautiful she seemed beyond the beauty of mortal women. In her dark hair was the likeness of the horned moon in honey-coloured cymophanes, every stone whereof held a straight beam of light imprisoned, that quivered and gleamed as sunbeams quiver wading in the clear deeps of a summer sea. She wore a coat hardy of soft crimson silk, close-fitting, so that she did truly apparel her apparel, and with her own loveliness made it more sumptuous. She said, My lords and guests in Ishne-Namatra, there be beds of down and sheets of lawn for all of you that be aweary. But know that I keep a sparrow-hawk sitting on a perch in the eastern tower, and he that will wake my sparrow-hawk this night long, alone without any company and without sleep, I shall come to him at the night's end, and shall grant unto him the first thing that he will ask me of earthly things. So saying, she departed like a dream. Bran Dr. Har said, Cast we lots for this adventure. But Just spake against it, saying, There's likely some guile herein. We must not in this accursed land suffer aught to seduce our minds, but follow our set purpose. We must not be of those who go forth for wool and come home shorn. Bran Dr. Har and Spitfire mocked at this, and cast lots between themselves. And the lot fell upon Lord Bran Dr. Har. Thou shalt not deny me this, said he to Lord Juss, else will I never more do thee good. I never could yet deny thee anything, answered Juss. Art not thou and I finger and thumb? Only forget not, whatsoe'er betide, wherefore we be come hither. Art not thou and I finger and thumb? Said Bran Dr. Har. Fear nothing, O friend of my heart, I'll not forget it. So while the others slept, Bran Dr. Har waked the sparrowhawk night long in the eastern chamber. For all that the cold hillside without was rough with hoarfrost, the air was warm in that chamber and heavy, disposing strongly to sleep. Yet he closed not an eye, but still beheld the sparrowhawk, telling it stories and tweaking it by the tail ever and anon as it grew drowsy. And it answered shortly and boorishly, looking upon him malevolently. And with the golden dawn, behold that lady in the shadowy doorway. At her entering in, the sparrowhawk clicked its wings as in anger, and without more ado tucked its beak beneath its wing and went to sleep. But that bright lady, looking on the Lord Bran Dr. Har, spake and said, Require it of me, my Lord Bran Dr. Har, that which thou most desirest of earthly things. But he, as one bedazzled, stood up, saying, O lady, is not thy beauty at the dawn of day an irradiation that might dispel the mists of hell? My heart is ravished with thy loveliness, and only fed with thy sight. Therefore thy body will I have, and none other thing earthly. Thou art a fool, she cried, that knowest not what thou askest. Of all things earthly mightest thou have taken choose, but I am not earthly. He answered, I will have naught else. Thou dost embrace then a great danger, said she, and loss of all thy good luck, for thee and thy friends beside. But Bran Dr. Har, seeing how her face became on a sudden such as are new-blown roses at the dawning, and her eyes wide and dark with love-longing, came to her and took her in his arms, and fell to kissing and embracing of her. On such wise they abode for a while, that he was ware of no thing else on earth, save only the sense-maddening caress of that lady's hair, the perfume of it, the kiss of her mouth, the swell and fall of that lady's breast straining against his. She said in his ear softly, I see thou art too masterful. I see thou art one who will be denied nothing, on whatsoever thine heart is set. Come. And they passed by a heavy curtained doorway into an inner chamber, where the air was filled with the breath of myrrh and nard and ambergris, a fragrancy as of sleeping loveliness. Here, amid the darkness of rich hangings and subdued glints of gold, a warm radiance of shaded lamps watched above a couch, great and broad and downy pillowed. And here for a long time they solaced them with love and all delight. Even as all things have an end, he said at the last, O my lady, mistress of hearts, here would I abide ever, abandoning all else for thy love's sake. But my companions tarry for me in thine halls below, and great matters wait on my direction. Give me thy divine mouth once again, and bid me adieu. She was lying as if asleep across his breast, smooth-skinned, white, warm, with shapely throat leaned backward against the spice-odorous darknesses of her unbound hair, one tress, heavy and splendid like a python, coiled between white arm and bosom. Swift as a snake she turned, clinging fiercely about him, pressing fiercely again to his her insatiable, sweet, fervent lips, crying that here must he dwell unto eternity in the intoxication of perfect love and pleasure. But when in the end, gently constraining her to loose him and let him go, he arose and clothed and armed him, that lady caught about her a translucent robe of silvery sheen, as when the summer moon veils but not hides with a filmy cloud her beauty's splendour, and so standing before him spake and said, Go then. This is got by casting of pearls to hogs. I may not slay thee, since over thy body I have no other power. But because thou shalt not laugh over much, having required me of that which was beyond the pact, and being enjoyed is now slighted of thee and abused, therefore know, proud man, that 3 gifts I here will grant thee thereto of mine own choosing. Thou shalt have war and not peace. He that thou worst hatest shall throw down and ruin thy fair lordship, Crothering Castle and the mains thereof. And though vengeance shall overtake him at the last, by another's hand than thine shall it come, and to thine hand shall it be denied. Therewith she fell a-weeping. And the Lord Brandok-Dahar, with great resolution, went forth from the chamber. And looking back from the threshold, he beheld both that and the outer chamber void of lady and Sparrowhawk both, and a great weariness came suddenly upon him. So, going down, he found Lord Juss and his companions sleeping on the cold stones, and the banquet hall empty of all gear, and dank with moss and cobwebs, and bats sleeping head downward among the crumbling roof-beams. Nor was any sign of last night's banqueting. So Brandok-Dahar roused his companions, and told Juss how he had fared, and of the weird laid on him by that lady. And they went greatly wondering forth of the accursed castle of Ishne-na-Martra, glad to come off so scatheless. On that 9th day of their journey from Salapanta, they came through wastelands of stone and living rock, where not so much as an earth-louse stirred with life. Gorges split the earth here and there, rock-walled labyrinths of gloom, unvisited for ever by sunbeam or moonbeam, turbulent in their depths with waters that leapt and churned for ever, never still and never silent. So was that day's journey tortuous, turning now up, now down along those river-banks to find crossing-places. When they were halted at noon by the deepest rift they had yet beheld, there came one hastening to them, and fell down by Juss, and lay panting face to earth, as breathless from long running. And when they raised him up, behold Mivarsh Faz, harnessed in the gear of a black rider of Jalkanias Faustus, and armed with axe and sword. Great was his agitation, and he speechless for lack of breath. They used him kindly, and gave him to drink from a great skin of wine, Zeldonius's gift. And anon he said, "He hath armed countless hundreds of our folk with weapons taken from Salapanta field. These, led by the devils his sons, with Philprits cursed of the gods, be gone before to hold all the ways be east of you. Night and day have I ridden and run to warn you. Himself with his main strength of devils ultramontane rideth hot on your tracks." They thanked him well, marvelling much that he should be at such pains to advertise them of their danger. "I have eat your salt," answered he, "and moreover ye are against this naughty wicked bald head that came over the mountains to oppress us. Therefore I would do you good. But I can little, for I am poor that was rich in land and fee, and I am alone that had formerly 500 spearmen lodging in my halls to do my pleasure." "There's need to do quickly that we do," said Lord Brandok-Dahar. "How great start of him hadst thou?" "He must be upon you in an hour or twain," said Mivarsh, and fell a-weeping. "To cope him in the open," said Juss, "were great glory, and our certain death." "Give me to think but a minute's while," said Brandok-Dahar. And while they busked them, he walked musing by the lip of that ravine, switching pebbles over the edge with his sword. Then he said, "This is without doubt that stream Athrashar, spoken of by Gro. O Mivarsh, runneth not this flood of Athrashar south to the salt lakes of Ogor Morveo? And was there not thereabout a hold named Eshgra Ogor?" Mivarsh answered, "This is so. But never I heard of any so witless as go thither. Here where we stand is the land fearsome enough, but Eshgra Ogor standeth at the very edge of the Maruna. No man hath harboured there these 100 years." "Standeth it yet?" said Brandok-Dahar. "For all I wot of," answered Mivarsh. "Is it strong?" he asked. "In old times it was thought no place stronger," answered Mivarsh. "But ye were as well die here by the hand of the devils ultramontane, as there be torn in pieces by bad spirits." Brandok-Dahar turned him about to Juss. "It is resolved?" said he. Juss answered, "Yea," and forthwith they started at a great pace south along the river. "Methought you should have gotten clean away ere this," said Mivarsh as they went. "This is but 9 or 10 days' journey, and 'tis now the 16th day since ye did leave me on Salapanta hills." Brandok-Dahar laughed. "16th," said he. "Thou'lt be rich, Mivarsh, if thou reckon gold pieces of this fashion thou dost days. This is but our 9th day's journey." But Mivarsh stood stoutly to it, saying that was the 7th day after their departure, when Corund first came to Salapanta, and I, fleeing now 9 days before his face, chanced on your tracks, and now out of all expectation on you. Nor for all their mocking would he be turned from this. And when, as they still pressed through the desert southward, the sun declined and set in a clear sky, behold the moon a little past her full, and just so that she was 7 days older than on that night she was when they came to Ishne-na-Martra. So he showed this wonder to Brandok-Dahar and Spitfire, and much they marvelled. "You are much to thank me," said Brandok-Dahar, "that I kept you not a full year awaiting of me. Beshrew me, but that 7 days' space seemed to me but an hour." "Likely enow to thee," said Spitfire somewhat greenly. but all we slept the week out on the cold stones, and I am half lamed yet with the ache on't. Nay, said Just, laughing, I will not have thee blame him. The moon was high when they came to the salt lakes, that lay one a little above the other in rocky basins. Their waters were like rough silver, and the harsh face of the wilderness was black and silver in the moonlight, and it was as a country of dead bones, blind and sterile beneath the moon. Betwixt the lakes a rib of rock rose monstrous to an eminence crag begirt on every side, with dark walls ringing it round above the cliffs. Thither they hastened, and as they climbed and stumbled among the crags, a she-owl squeaked on the battlements, and took wing ghost-like above their heads. The teeth of Mivarch Faz chattered, but right glad were the demons as they won up the rocks, and entered at last into that deserted burg. Without, the night was still, but fires were burning in the desert eastward, and others as they watched were kindled in the west, and soon was the circle joined of twinkling points of red about Eshgra Ogo and the lakes. Just said, By an hour have we forestalled them, and behold how he ringeth us about, as men ring a scorpion in flame. So they made all sure, and set the guard, and slept until past dawn. But Mivarch slept not, for terror of hop thrushes from the maruna. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11 of The Worm Ouroboros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jason Mills. The Worm Ouroboros by E.R. Edisson. Chapter 11. The Burg of Eshgra Ogo. Of the Lord Corun's besieging of the burg above the lakes of Orgomoveo, and what befell there betwixt him and the demons, wherein is also an example how the subtle of heart standeth at whiles in great danger of his death. When the Lord Corund knew of a surety that he held them of Demonland shut up in Eshgra Ogo, he let dight supper in his tent, and made a surfeit of venison pasties, and heathcocks, and lobsters from the lakes. Therewith he drank nigh a skinful of sweet dark Thramnian wine, in such sort that an hour before midnight, becoming speechless, he was holpen by Gro to his couch, and slept a great deep sleep till morning. Gro watched in the tent, his right elbow propped on the table, his cheek resting on his hand, his left hand reaching forward with delicate fingers, toying now with the sleek heavy perfumed masses of his beard, now with the goblet, whence he sipped ever and anon pale wine of Permio. His thoughts, inconstant as insects in a summer garden, flitted ever round and round, resting now on the scene before him, the great form of his general wrapped in slumber, now on other scenes sundered by great gulfs of time, or weary leagues of perilous ways. So that in one instant he saw in fancy that lady in Carse welcoming her lord returned in triumph, and him, maybe, crowned king of new vanquished Impland, and in the next, swept from the future to the past, beheld again the great sending off in Zajezaculo, Gazlark in his splendour on the golden stairs, saying adieu to those three captains and their matchless armament, foredoomed to dogs and crows on Salapanta hills. And always, like a gloomy background darkening his mind, loomed the yawning void, featureless and vast, beyond the investing circle of Corun's armies, the blind blasted emptiness of the maruna. With such fancies, melancholy like a great bird settled upon his soul. The lights flickered in their sockets, and for very weariness Gro's eyelids closed at length over his large liquid eyes, and, too tired to stir from his seat to seek his couch, he sank forward on the table, his head pillowed on his arms. The red glow of the brazier slumbered ever dimmer and dimmer on the slender form and black shining curls of Gro, and on the mighty frame of Corund, where he lay with one great spurred booted leg stretched along the couch, and the other flung out sideways, resting its heel on the ground. It wanted but 2 hours of noon when a sunbeam striking through an opening in the hangings of the tent shone upon Corun's eyelids, and he awoke fresh and brisk as a youth on a hunting morn. He waked Gro, and giving him a clap on the shoulder, "Thou wrongest a fair morn," he said. "The devil damn me black as buttermilk, if it be not great shame in thee, and I, that was born this day 46 years, as the years come about, busy with mine affairs since sunrise." Gro yawned and smiled and stretched himself. "O Corund," he said, "counterfeit a livelier wonder in thine eyes if thou wilt persuade me thou sawest the sunrise. For I think that were as new and unexampled a sight for thee as any I could produce to thee in Impland." Corund answered, "Truly, I was seldom so uncivil as surprise Madame Aurora in her nightgown. and the thrice or four times I have been forced thereto taught me it is an hour of crude airs and mists which breed cold dark humours in the body, an hour when the torch of life burns weakest. Within there! Bring me my morning draught. The boy brought 2 cups of white wine, and while they drank, "A thin ungracious drink is the wellspring," said Corrund, "a drink for queasy-stomached skipjacks, for sand-levericks, not for men. And like it is the day-spring, an ungrateful sapless hour, an hour for stabby-the-backs and cold-blooded betrayers. Ah, give me wine," he cried, "and noonday vices and brazen-browed iniquities." "Yet there's many a deed of profit done by owl-light," said Gro. "Aye," said Corrund, "deeds of darkness, and there, my lord, I'm still thy scholar. Come, let's be doing." And taking his helm and weapons, and buckling about him his great wolfskin cloak, for the air was eager and frosty without, he strode forth. Gro wrapped himself in his fur mantle, drew on his lambskin gloves, and followed him. "If thou wilt take my rede," said Lord Gro, as they looked on Eshgroa Ogo, stark in the barren sunlight, "thou wilt do this honour to Filpritz, which I question not he much desireth, to suffer him and his folk take first knock at this nut. It hath a hard look. Pity it were to waste good witchland blood in a first assault, when these vile instruments stand ready to our purpose." Corrund grunted in his beard, and with Gro at his elbow paced in silence through the lines, his keen eyes searching ever the cliffs and walls of Eshgroa Ogo, till, in some half-hour's space, he halted again before his tent, having made a complete circuit of the burg. Then he spake, "Put me in yonder fighting stead, and if it were only but I and 50 able lads to man the walls, yet would I hold it against 10,000. Gro held his peace a while, and then said, "Thou speakest this in all sadness?" "In sober sadness," answered Corrund, squaring his shoulders at the burg. "Then thou'lt not assault it?" Corrund laughed. "Not assault it, quotha! That were a sweet tale twixt the boiled and the roast in Carse. I'd not assault it." "Yet consider," said Gro, taking him by the arm, "so shapeth the matter in my mind. They be few and shut up in a little place, in this far land, out of reach and out of mind of all succour. Were they devils and not men, the multitude of our armies and thine own tried qualities must daunt them. Be the place never so cocksure, doubt not some doubts thereof must poison their security. Therefore, before thou risk a repulse which must dispel those doubts, use thine advantage. Bid just to a parley. Offer him conditions, it skills not what. Bribe them out into the open." "A pretty plan," said Corrund. "Thou'lt merit wisdom's crown if thou canst tell me what conditions we can offer that they would take. And whilst thou riddlest that, remember that though thou and I be masters hereabouts, another reigns in Carse." Lord Gro laughed gently. "Leave jesting," he said, "O Corrund, and never hope to gull me to believe thee such a babe in policy. Shall the king blame us though we sign away Demonland, aye, and the wide world besides, to lure him forth? Unless indeed we were so neglectful of our interest as suffer him once forth to elude our clutches." "Gro," said Corrund, "I love thee, but hardly canst thou receive things as I receive them, that have dealt all my days in great stripes, given and taken in the open field. I sticked not to take part in thy notable treason against these poor snakes of Impland that we trapped in Orpish. All's fair against such dirt. Besides, great need was upon us then, and hard it is for an empty sack to stand straight. But here is far other matter. All's won here but the plucking of the apple. It is the very main of my ambition to humble these demons openly, by the terror of my sword. Wherefore I will not use upon them cogs and stops and all thy devilish tricks, such as should bring me more of scorn than of glory in the eyes of aftercomers." So speaking, he issued command, and sent an herald to go forth beneath the battlements with a flag of truce. And the herald cried aloud and said, "From Corrund of Witchland unto the lords of Demonland. Thus saith the Lord Corrund, I hold this burg of Eshgroa Ogo as a nut betwixt the crackers. Come down and speak with me in the bateable land before the burg, and I swear to you peace and grith while we parley, and thereto pledge I mine honour as a man of war." So when the due ceremonies were performed, the Lord Just came down from Eshgroa Ogo, and with him the Lords Spitfire and Brandok Dahar, and 20 men to be their bodyguard. Corrund went to meet them with his guard about him, and his 4 sons that fared with him to Impland, Hackmon namely, and Hemming, and Viglus, and Domarnes, sullen and dark young men, likely of look, of a little less fierceness than their father. Gro, fair to see and slender as a racehorse, went at his side, muffled to the ears in a cloak of ermine, and behind came Filpritz Faz, helmed with a winged helm of iron and gold. A gilded corslet had Filpritz, and trousers of panther's skin, and he came a-slinking at Corrun's heel, as the jackal slinks behind the lion. When they were met, Just spake and said, This would I know first, my lord Corrund, how thou comest hither, and why, and by what right thou disputest with us the ways eastward out of Impland. Corrund answered, leaning on his spear, I need not answer thee in this. And yet I will. How came I? I answer thee, over the cold mountain wall of Acrascabranth, and 'tis a feat hath not his fellow in man's remembrance until now, with so great a force and in so short a space of time. 'Tis well enough, said Just. I'll grant thee thou hast outrun mine expectations of thee. Next thou demandest why, said Corrund. Suffice it for thee that the king hath had advertisement of your farings into Impland, and your designs therein. For to bring these to naught am I come. There was many firkins of wine drunk dry in Carsey, said Hackmon, and many a noble person senseless and spewing on the ground ere morn for pure delight, when cursed Galdry was made away. We were little minded these healths should be proved vain at last. Was that ere thou rodest from Permio, said Lord Brandok de Ha? The merry god wrote of our side that night, if my memory cheat not. Thou demandest last, said Corrund, my lord Just, by what right I bar your passage east away. Know, therefore, that not of mine own self speak I unto you, but as vicar in wide-fronted Impland of our Lord Geraes the 12th, King of Kings, most glorious and most great. There remaineth no way out for you from this place, save into the rigour of mine hands. Therefore let us, according to the nature of great men, agree to honourable conditions. And this is mine offer, O Just. Yield up this burg of Eshgra Ogo, and there with thy sealed word, in a writing, acknowledging our lord the king to be king of Demonland, and all ye his quiet and obedient subjects, even as we be. And I will swear unto you of my part, and in the name of our lord the king, and give you hostages thereto, that ye shall depart in peace whither you list, with all love and safety. The Lord Just scowled fiercely on him. O Corrund, he said, as little as we do understand the senseless wind, so little we understand thy word. Oft enow hath grey silver been in the fire betwixt us and you Witchlanders, for the house of Geraes fared ever like the foul toad, that may not endure to smell the sweet savour of the vine when it flourisheth. So for this time we will abide in this hold, and withstand your most grievous attempts. With free honesty and open heart, said Corrund, I made thee this offer, which if thou refuse I am not thy lackey to renew it. Gro said, It is writ and sealed, and wanteth but thy sign manual, my lord Just. And with the word he made sign to Filprit's Faz, that went to Lord Just with a parchment. Just put the parchment by, saying, No more, ye are answered. And he was turning on his heel, when Filpritz, louting forward suddenly, gave him a great yerk beneath the ribs, with a dagger slipped from his sleeve. But Just wore a privy coat that turned the dagger. Howbeit, with the greatness of that stroke, he staggered her back. Now Spitfire clapped hand to sword, and the other demons with him. But Just loudly shouted that they should not be truce-breakers, but know first what Corrund would do. And Corrund said, Dost hear me, Just? I had neither hand nor part in this. Brandok de Ha drew up his lip, and said, This is naught but what was to be looked for. It is a wonder, O Just, that thou shouldst hold out to such mucky dogs a hand without a whip in it. Such strokes come home or miss merely, said Gro softly in Corrund's ear, and he hugged himself beneath his cloak, looking with furtive amusement on the demons. But Corrund, with a face red in anger, said, It is thine answer, O Just. And when Just said, It is our answer, O Corrund, Corrund said violently, Then red war I give you, and this withal to testify our honour. And he let lay hands on Filprit's Faz, and with his own hand hacked the head from his body before the eyes of both their armies. Then in a great voice he said, As bloodily as I have revenged the honour of Witchland on this Filpritz, so will I revenge it on all of you, or ever I draw off mine armies from these lakes of Orgo Morveo. So the demons went up into the burg, and Gro and Corrund home to their tents. This was well thought on, said Gro, to flaunt the flag of seeming honesty, and with the motion rid us of this fellow that promised ever to grow thorns to make uneasy our seat in Impland. Corrund answered him not a word. In that same hour Corrund marshalled his folk and assaulted Eshgra Ogo, placing those of Impland in the van. They prospered not at all. Many a score lay slain without the walls that night, and the obscene beasts from the desert feasted on their bodies by the light of the moon. Next morning the Lord Corrund sent an herald, and bade the demons again to a parley. And now he spake only to Brandok de Ha, bidding him deliver up those brethren, Just and Spitfire. And if thou wilt yield them to my pleasure, then shalt thou and all thy people else depart in peace without conditions. An offer indeed, said Lord Brandok de Ha, if it be not in mockery. Say it loud, that my folk may hear. Corund did so, and the demons heard it from the walls of the burg. Lord Brandok de Ha stood somewhat apart from Juss and Spitfire and their guard. Libel it me out, he said. For good as I now must deem thy word, thine hand and seal must I have to show my followers ere they consent with me in such a thing. Write thou, said Corund to Gro. To write my name is all my scholarship. And Gro took forth his inkhorn, and wrote in a great fair hand this offer on a parchment. The most fearfullest oaths thou knowest, said Corund, and Gro wrote them, whispering, He mocketh us only. But Corund said, No matter, 'tis a chance worth our chancing, and slowly and with labour signed his name to the writing, and gave it to Lord Brandok de Ha. Brandok de Ha read it attentively, and tucked it in his bosom beneath his byrnie. This, he said, shall be a keepsake for me of thee, my Lord Corund, reminding me, and here his eyes grew terrible, so long as there surviveth a soul of you in Witchland, that I am still to teach the world thoroughly what that man must abide that durst affront me with such an offer. Corund answered him, Thou art a dapper fellow. It is a wonder that thou wilt strut in the tented field with all this womanish gear. Thy shield, how many of these sparkling baubles thinkest thou I'd leave in it were we once come to knocks? I'll tell thee, answered Lord Brandok de Ha, for every jewel that hath been beat out of my shield in battle, never yet went I to war that I brought not home an hundredfold to set it fair again from the spoils I obtained from mine enemies. Now this will I bid thee, O Corund, for thy scornful words. I will bid thee to single combat, here and in this hour, which if thou deny, then art thou an open and apparent dastard. Corund chuckled in his beard, but his brow darkened somewhat. I pray what age dost thou take me of? Said he. I bare a sword when thou was yet in swaddling clothes. Behold mine arm is, and what advantage I hold upon you. Oh, my sword is enchanted, my lord, it will not out of the scabbard. Brandok de Ha smiled disdainfully, and said to Spitfire, Mark well, I pray thee, this great lord of Witchland. How many true fingers hath a witch on his left hand? As many as on his right, said Spitfire. Good, and how many on both? 2 less than a deuce, said Spitfire, for there be false facets to the fingers' ends. Very well answered, said Lord Brandok de Ha. You're pleasant, Corund said, but your fusty jibes move me not a whit. It were a simple part indeed to take thine offer, when all wise counsels bid me use my power and crush you. Thou'dst kill me soon with thy mouth, said Brandok de Ha. In sum, thou art a brave man when it comes to roaring and swearing. A big bubber of wine, as men say to drink drunk, is an ordinary matter with thee every day in the week. But I fear thou durst not fight. Dost not thy nose swell at that? Said Spitfire. But Corund shrugged his shoulders. A foutra for your baits, he answered. I am scarce bounden to do such a kindness to you of Demonland, as lay down mine advantage and fight alone against a sworder. Your old foxes are seldom taken in springies. I thought so, said Lord Brandok de Ha. Surely the frog will have hair sooner than any of you Witchlanders shall dare to stand me. So ended the second parley before Eshgra Ogo. The same day Corund essayed again to storm the hold, and grievous was the battle, and hard put to it were they of Demonland to hold the walls. Yet in the end were Corund's men thrown back with great slaughter, and night fell, and they returned to their tents. Mine invention, said Gro, when on the next day they took counsel together, hath yet some contrivance in her purse which shall do us good, if it fall but out to our mind. But I doubt much it will dislike thee. Well, say it out, and I'll give thee my censure on't, said Corund. Gro spake. It hath been shown we may not have down this tree by hewing above ground. Let's dig about the roots, and first give them a 7 nights space for reckoning up their chances, that they may see morning and evening from the burg thine armies set down to invest them. Then, when their hopes are something sobered by that sight, and want of action hath trained their minds to sad reflection, call them to parley, going straight beneath the wall. And this time shalt thou address thyself only to the common sort, offering them all generous and free conditions thou canst think on. There's little they can ask that we'd not blithely grant them, if they'll but yield us up their captains. It mislikes me, answered Corund. Yet it may serve. But thou shalt be my spokesman herein. For never yet went I cap in hand to ask favour of the common muck of the world, nor I will not do it now. Oh, but thou must, said Gro. Of thee they will receive in good faith what in me they would account but practice. That's true enough, said Corund, but I cannot stomach it. Withal, I am too rough spoken. Gro smiled. He that hath need of a dog, he said, calleth him Sir Dog. Come, come, I'll school thee to it. Is it not a smaller thing than months of tedious hardship in this frozen desert? Bethink thee, too, what honour it were to thee to ride home to Corsey with Juss and Spitfire and Brandok Dahar bounden in a string. Not without much persuasion was Corund won to this, yet at the last he consented. For 7 days and 7 nights his armies sat before the Burg without sign, and on the 8th day he bade the demons to a parley, and when that was granted, went with his sons and 20 men-at-arms up the great rib of rock between the lakes, and stood below the east wall of the Burg. Bitter chill was the air that day. Powdery snow, light fallen, blew in little wisps along the ground, and the rocks were slippery with an invisible coat of ice. Lord Groh, being troubled with an ague, excused himself from that faring and kept his tent. Corund stood beneath the walls with his folk about him. "I have matter of import," he cried, "and 'tis needful it be heard both by the highest and the lowest amongst you. Ere I begin, summon them all to this part of the walls. A look-out is enow to shield you of the other parts from any sudden onslaught, which besides I swear to you is clean without my purpose." So when they were thick on the walls above him, he began to say, "Soldiers of Demonland, against you had I never quarrel. Behold how in this Impland I have made freedom flourish as a flower. I have strook off the heads of Philpritz Faz, and Illarosh, and Lermesh, and Gandassa, and Fax Fair Faz, that were the lords and governors here aforetime, abounding in all the bloody and crying sins, oppression, gluttony, idleness, cruelty, and extortion. And of my clemency I delivered all their possessions unto their subjects to hold and order after their own will alone, who before did put on patience, and endured with much heart-burning the tyranny of these Fazes, until by me they found a remedy for their more freedom. In like manner, not against you do I war, O men of Demonland, but against the tyrants that enforced you for their private gain to suffer hardship and death in this remote country. Namely, against Juss and Spitfire, that came hither in quest of their cursed brother, whom the might of the king hath happily removed. And against Brandok Dahar am I come, of insolence untamed, who liveth a chambering, idle life, eating and drinking and exercising tyranny, while the pleasant lands of Crothering and Fales and Straparden, and the dwellers in the isles, Sorbet, Morvay, Strufe, Dalnay, and Carnarvay, and they of Westmark, and all the western parts of Demonland, groan and wax lean to feed his luxury. To your hurt only have these 3 led you, as cattle to the slaughter. Deliver them to me, that I may chastise them, and I, that am great Viceroy of Impland, will make you free and grant you lordships, a lordship for every man of you in this my realm of Impland." While Corund spake, the Lord Brandok Dahar went among the soldiers, bidding them hold their peace, and not murmur against Corund. But those that were most hot for action he sent about an errand, preparing what he had in mind. So that when the Lord Corund ceased from his declaiming, all was ready to hand. And with one voice the soldiers of Lord Juss that stood upon the wall cried out and said, "This is thy word, O Corund, and this our answer." And therewith flung down upon him from pots and buckets and every kind of vessel a deluge of slops and offal and all filth that came to hand. A bucketful took Corund in the mouth, befouling all his great beard, so that he gave back spitting, and he and his, standing close beneath the wall, and little expecting so sudden and ill an answer, fared shamefully, being all well soused and bemurdered with filth and lie. Therewith went up great shouts of laughter from the walls. But Corund cried out, "O filth of Demonland, this is my latest word with you, and though 'twere 10 years I must besiege this hold, yet will I take it over your heads. And very ill to do with shall ye find me in the end, and very puissant, proud, mighty, cruel, and bloody in my conquest." "What, lads," said Lord Brandok Dahar, standing on the battlements, "have we not fed this beast with pig-wash enow, but he must still be snuffing and snouking at our gate? Give me another pailful." So the witches returned to their tents with great shame. So hot was Corund in anger against the demons, that he stayed not to eat nor drink at his coming down from Eshgrar Ogo, but straight gathered force, and made an assault upon the Burg, the mightiest he had yet essayed. And his picked men of Witchland were in that assault, and he himself to lead them. Thrice by main fury they won up into the hold, but all were slain who set foot therein, and Corund's young son Dormanes wounded to the death. And at even they drew off from the battle. There fell in that fight 180 demons, and of the imps 500, and of the witches 399, and many were hurt of either side. Wrath sat like thunder on Corund's brow at supper-time. He ate his meat savagely, thrusting great gobbets in his mouth, crunching the bones like a beast, taking deep draughts of wine with every mouthful, which yet dispelled not his black mood. Over against him Groh sat silent, shivering now and then for all that he kept his ermine cloak about him and the brazier stood at his elbow. He made but a poor meal, drinking mulled wine in little sips, and dipping little pieces of bread in it. So wore without speech that cheerless and unkindly meal, until the Lord Corrund, looking suddenly across the board at Groa, and catching his eye studying him, said, "That was a bright star of thine, and then shined clear upon thee, when thou tookest this bout of shivering fits, and so wentest not with me to be soused with muck before the burg." "Who would have dreamed," answered Groa, "of their using so base and shameful a part?" "Not thou, I'll swear," said Corrund, looking evilly upon him, and marking, as he thought, a twinkling light in Groa's eyes. Groa shivered again, sipped his wine, and shifted his glance uneasily under that unfriendly stare. Corrund drank a while in silence, then flushing suddenly a darker red, said, leaning heavily across the board at him, "Dost know why I said, 'Not thou'?" "'Twas scarce needful to thy friend," said Groa. "I said it," said Corrund, "because I know thou didst look for another thing when thou didst skulk shamming here." "Another thing?" "Sit not there like some prim-mouthed miss, feigning an innocence all know well thou hast not," said Corrund, "or I'll kill thee. Thou plottest my death with the demons, and because thyself hast no shred of honour in thy soul, thou hadst not the wit to perceive that their nobility would shrink from such a betrayal as thy hopes entertained." Groa said, "This is a jest I cannot laugh at, or else 'tis madman's brabble." "Dissembling cur," said Corrund, "be sure that I hold him not less guilty that holds the ladder than him that mounts the wall. It was thy design they should smite us at unawares when we went up to them with this proposal thou didst urge on me so hotly." Groa made as if to rise. "Sit down," said Corrund. "Answer me. Didst not thou egg on the poor snipe Filpritz to that attempt on Juss?" "He told me on't," said Groa. "Oh, thou art cunning," said Corrund. "There too I see thy treachery. Had they fallen upon us, thou mightest have thrown thyself safely upon their mercy." "This is foolishness," said Groa. "We were far stronger." "'Tis so," said Corrund. "When did I charge thee with wisdom and sober judgment? With treachery I know thou art soaked wet." "And thou art my friend," said Groa. Corrund said in a while, "I have long known thee to be both a subtle and dissembling fox, and now I durst trust thee no more, for fear I should fall further into thy danger. I am resolved to murder thee." Groa fell back in his chair and flung out his arms. "I have been here before," he said. "I have beheld it in moonlight, and in the barren glare of day, in fair weather and in hail and snow, with the great winds charging over the wastes, and I knew it was accursed. From Morna Maruna, ere I was born, or thou, or Corrund, or any of us, treason and cruelty blacker than night herself had birth, and brought death to their begetter and all his folk. From Morna Maruna bloweth this wind about the waste to blast our love and bring us destruction. Ay, kill me. I'll not ward myself, not i' the smallest." "'Tis small matter, goblin," said Corrund, "whether thou shouldst or no. Thou art but a louse between my fingers to kill or cast away as shall seem me good." "I was King Gaslark's man," said Groa, as if talking in a dream, "and between a man and a boy, near 15 years I served him true and costly. Yet it was my fortune in all that time, and at the ending thereof, only to get a beard on my chin and remorse at heart. To what scorned purpose must I plot against him? Pity of Witchland? Of Witchland sliding us then into the pit of adverse luck, 'twas that made force upon me. And I served Witchland well, but fate ever fought at the other side. I it was that counselled King Corais the 11th to draw out from the fight at Cartadza, yet wanton fortune trod down the scale for Demonland. I prayed him not wrastle with Goldry in the Foliot Isles, thou didst back me. Naught but rebukes and threats of death gat I therefrom. But because my redes were set at naught, evil fell upon Witchland. I helped our lord the king when he conjured and made a sending against the demons. He loved me therefore and upheld me, but great envy was raised up against me in Corsi for that fact. Yet I bear up, for thy friendship and thy lady wife's were as bright fires to warm me against all the frosts of their ill will. And now for love of thee I fared with thee to Impland. And here by the Maruna, where in old days I wandered in danger and in sorrow, it is fitting I behold at length the emptiness of all my days." Therewith Groa fell silent a minute, and then began to say, "O Corrund, I'll strip bare my soul to thee before thou kill me. It is most true that until now, sitting before Eshgroa Ogo, it hath been present to my heart how great an advantage we held against the demons, and the glory of their defence, so little a strength against us so many, and the great glory of their flinging of us back, these things were a splendour to my soul beholding them. Such glamour hath ever shone to me all my life's days, when I beheld great men battling still beneath the bludgeonings of adverse fortune, that, howsoever they be mine enemies, it lieth not in my virtue to withhold from admiration of them, and well nigh love. But never was I false to thee, nor much less ever thought, as thou most unkindly accusest me, to compass thy destruction. Thou dost whine like a woman for thy life, said Corrund. Cowardly hounds never stirred pity in me. Yet he moved not, only looking dourly on Gro. Gro plucked forth his own sword, and pushed it towards Corrund hilt foremost across the board. Such words are worse than sword thrusts betwixt us twain, said he. Thou shalt see how I'll welcome death. The king will praise thee, when thou showest the cause, and it will be sweet news to Corineus and them that have held me in their hate, that thy love hath cast me off, and thou hast rid them of me at last. But Corrund stirred not. After a space he filled another cup, and drank, and sat on. And Gro sat motionless before him. At last Corrund rose heavily from his seat, and pushing Gro's sword back across the table, "Thou'd best to bed," said he. "For the night's air's o'ershrewd for thine ague. Sleep on my couch to-night." The day dawned cold and grey, and with the dawn Corrund ordered his lines about Esgra-Ogo, and sat down for a siege. For 10 days he sat before the burg, and naught befell from dawn till night, from night till dawn. Only the sentinels walked on the walls, and Corrund's folk guarded their lines. On the 11th day came a bank of fog rolling westward from the Maruna, chill and dank, blotting out the features of the land. Snow fell, and the fog hung on the land, and night came of such a pitchy blackness that even by torchlight a man might not see his hand stretched forth at arm's length before him. 5 days the fog held. On the 5th night, it being the 24th of November, in the darkness of the 3rd hour after midnight, the alarm was sounded, and Corrund summoned by a runner from the north, with word that a sally was made from Esgra-Ogo, and the lines bursten through in that quarter, and fighting going forward in the murk. Corrund was scarce harnessed and gotten forth into the night, when a second runner came hot-foot from the south, with tidings of a great fight thereaway. All was confounded in the dark, and naught certain, save that the demons were broken out from Esgra-Ogo. In a space, as Corrund came with his folk to the northern quarter and joined in the fight, came a message from his son Hemming that Spitfire and a number with him were broken out at the other side, and gotten away westward, and a great band chasing him back towards outer Impland, and therewith that more than 100 demons were surrounded and penned in by the shore of the lakes, and the burg entered and taken by Corrund's folk. But of Juss and Brandok Dahar no certain news, save that they were not of Spitfire's company, but were with those against whom Corrund went in person, having fared forth northaway. So went the battle through the night. Corrund himself had sight of Juss, and exchanged shots with him with 12 spears in a lifting of the fog toward dawn, and a son of his bare witness of Brandok Dahar in that same quarter, and had gotten a great wound from him. When night was past, and the witches returned from the pursuit, Corrund straightly questioned his officers, and went himself about the battlefield, hearing each man's story and viewing the slain. Those demons that were hemmed against the lakes had all lost their lives, and some were taken up dead in other parts, and some few alive. These would his officers let slay, but Corrund said, "Since I am king in Impland, till that the king receive it of me, it is not this handful of earth-lice shall shake my safety here, and I may well give them their lives, that fought sturdily against us." So he gave them peace, and he said unto Gro, "Better that for every demon dead in Ogo Morveo 10 should rise up against us, if but Juss only and Brandok Dahar were slain." "I'll be in the tale with thee if thou wilt proclaim them dead," said Gro, "and nothing is likelier, if they be gone with but 2 or 3 on to the Maruna, than that such a tale should come true ere it were told in Carse." "Pshaw!" said Corrund, "to the devil with such false feathers. What's done shows bravery now without them. Impland conquered, Juss's army minced to a Gallimorfray, himself and Brandok Dahar chased like runaway thralls up on the Maruna, where if devils tear them, 'tis my best wish come true. If not, thou'lt hear of them, be sure. Dost think these can survive on earth and not raise a racket that shall be heard from hence to Carse?" End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12 of The Worm Ouroboros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jason Mills. The Worm Ouroboros by E. R. Edisson. Chapter 12. Kostra Pivracha. Of the coming of the lords of Demonland to Morna Maruna, whence they beheld the Zimiambian mountains, seen also by Gro in years gone by. and of the wonders seen by them, and perils undergone and deeds done in their attempt on Costra Pivracha, the which alone of all earth's mountains looketh down upon Costra Beloin, and none shall ascend up into Costra Beloin that hath not first looked down upon her. Now it is to be said of Lord Juss and Lord Brandok the Har, that they, finding themselves parted from their people in the fog, and utterly unable to find them, when the last sound of battle had died away, wiped and put up their bloody swords, and set forth at a great pace eastward. Only Mivosh fared with them of all their following. His lips were drawn back a little, showing his teeth, but he carried himself proudly, as one who, being resolved to die, walks with a quiet mind to his destruction. Day after day they journeyed, sometimes in clear weather, sometimes in mist or sleet, over the changeless desert, without a landmark, save here a little sluggish river, or here a piece of rising ground, or a pond, or a clump of rocks, small things which faded from sight amid the waste ere they were passed by a half-mile's distance. So was each day like yesterday, drawing to a morrow like to it again, and always fear walked at their heel, and sat beside them sleeping. Clanking of wings heard above the wind, a brooding hush of menace in the sunshine, and noises out of the void of darkness as of teeth chattering. So came they on the 20th day to Morna Maruna, and stood at even in the sorrowful twilight by the little round castle, silent on Ompren Edge. From their feet the cliffs dropped sheer. Strange it was, standing on that frozen lip of the Maruna, as on the limit of the world, to gaze southward on a land of summer, and to breathe faint summer airs blowing up from blossoming trees and flower-clad Alps. In the depths a carpet of huge tree-tops clothed a vast stretch of country, through the midst of which, seen here and there in a bend of silver among the woods, the Barvinan bore the waters of 1,000 secret mountain solitudes down to an unknown sea. Beyond the river the deep woods, blue with distance, swelled to feathery hill-tops, with some sharper-featured loftier heights bodying cloudily beyond them. The demons strained their eyes, searching the curtain of mystery behind and above those foothills, but the great peaks, like great ladies, shrouded themselves against their curious gaze, and no glimpse was shown them of the snows. Surely to be in Morna Maruna was to be in the death-chamber of some once lovely presence. Stains of fire were on the walls. The fair gallery of open woodwork that ran above the main hall was burnt through, and partly fallen in ruin, the blackened ends of the beams that held it jutting blindly in the gap. Among the wreck of carved chairs and benches, broken and worm-eaten, some shreds of figured tapestries rotted, the home now of beetles and spiders. Patches of colour, faded lines mildewed and damp with the corruption of 200 years, lingered to be the memorials, like the mummied skeleton of a king's daughter long ago untimely dead, of sweet gracious paintings on the walls. 5 nights and 5 days the demons and Mivosh dwelt in Morna Maruna, inured to portents till they marked them as little as men mark swallows at their window. In the still night were flames seen, and flying forms dim in the moonlit air, and in moonless nights unstarred, moans heard and gibbering accents, prodigies beside their beds, and ridings in the sky, and fleshless fingers plucking at Juss unseen when he went forth to make question of the night. Cloud and mist abode ever in the south, and only the foothills showed of the great ranges beyond Barvinan. But on the evening of the 6th day before Yule, it being the 19th of December, when Betelgeuse stands at midnight on the meridian, a wind blew out of the northwest with changing fits of sleet and sunshine. Day was fading as they stood above the cliff. All the forest land was blue with shades of approaching night. The river was dull silver. The wooded heights afar mingled their outlines with the towers and banks of turbulent deep blue vapour that hurtled in ceaseless passage through the upper air. Suddenly a window opened in the clouds to a space of clean, wan, wind-swept sky high above the shaggy hills. Surely Juss caught his breath in that moment, to see those deathless ones, where they shone pavilioned in the pellucid air, far, vast, and lonely, most like to creatures of unascended heaven, of wind and of fire all compact, too pure to have aught of the gross elements of earth or water. It was as if the rose-red light of sundown had been frozen to crystal, and these hewn from it to abide to everlasting, strong and unchangeable amid the welter of earth-born mists below and tumultuous sky above them. The rift ran wider, eastward and westward, opening on moor peaks and sunset-kindled snows, and a rainbow leaning to the south was like a sword of glory across the vision. Motionless, like hawks staring from that high place of prospect, Juss and Brandok Dahar looked on the mountains of their desire. Juss spake, haltingly, as one talking in a dream. The sweet smell, this gusty wind, the very stone thy foot standeth on, I know them all before. There's not a night since we sailed out of Looking-Haven that I have not beheld in sleep these mountains, and known their names. Who told thee their names? Asked Lord Brandok Dahar. My dream, Juss answered, and first I dreamed it in mine own bed in Galing when I came home from guesting with thee last June. And they be true dreams that are dreamed there. And he said, Seest thou where the foothills part to a dark valley that runneth deep into the chain, and the mountains are bare to view from crown to foot? Mark where, beyond the nearer range, bleak-visaged precipices, cobweb-streaked with huge snow corridors, rise to a rampart where the rock towers stand against the sky. This is the great ridge of Kostra Pivracha, and the loftiest of those spires his secret mountain-top. As he spoke, his eye followed the line of the eastern ridge, where the towers, like dark gods going down from heaven, plunge to a parapet which runs level above a curtain of avalanche-fluted snow. He fell silent as his gaze rested on the sister peak that east of the gap flamed skyward in wild cliffs to an airy snowy summit, soft-lined as a maiden's cheek, purer than dew, lovelier than a dream. While they looked, the sunset fires died out upon the mountains, leaving only pale hues of death and silence. If thy dream, said Lord Brandok Dahar, conducted thee down this edge, over the Barvinam, through yonder woods and hills, up through the leagues of ice and frozen rock that stand betwixt us and the main ridge, up by the right road to the topmost snows of Kostra Beloin, that were a dream indeed. All this it showed me, said Juss, up to the lowest rocks of the great north buttress of Kostra Pivracha, that must first be scaled by him that would go up to Kostra Beloin. But beyond those rocks not even a dream hath ever climbed. Ere the light fades, I'll show thee our pass over the nearer range. He pointed where a glacier crawled betwixt shadowy walls down from a torn snowfield that rose steeply to a saddle. East of it stood two white peaks, and west of it a sheer-faced and long-backed mountain like a citadel, squat and dark beneath the wild skyline of Kostra Pivracha that hung in air beyond it. The Zia Valley, said Juss, that runneth into Barvinan. There lieth our way, under that dark bastion called by the gods Tethrach Namth. On the morrow Lord Brandok Dahar came to Mivarsh Faz and said, It is needful that this day we go down from Ompran Edge. I would for no sake leave thee on the Maruna, but 'tis no walking matter to descend this wall. Art thou a cragsman? I was born, answered he, in the high valley of Parashin, by the upper waters of the Berun in Impland. There boys scarce toddle ere they can climb a rock. This climb affrights me not, nor those mountains. But the land is unknown and terrible, and many loathly ones inhabit it, ghosts and eaters of men. O devils transmarine and my friends, is it not enough? Let us turn again, and if the gods save our lives we shall be famous for ever, that came unto Morna Maruna and returned alive. But Juss answered and said, O Mivarsh Faz, know that not for fame are we come on this journey. Our greatness already shadoweth all the world, as a great cedar tree spreading his shadow in a garden. And this enterprise, mighty though it be, shall add to our glory only so much as thou mightest add to these forests of the Barvinan by planting of one more tree. But so it is, that the great king of Witchland, practising in darkness in his royal palace of Carsis such arts of gramarye and sendings magical as the world hath not been grieved with until now, sent an ill thing to take my brother, the Lord Goldry Blusko, who is dear to me as mine own soul. And they that dwell in secret sent me word in a dream, bidding me, if I would have tidings of my dear brother, inquire in Kostra Beloin. Therefore, O Mivarsh, go with us if thou wilt, but if thou wilt not, why, fare thee well, for naught but my death shall stay me from going thither. And Mivarsh, bethinking him that if the manticores of the mountain should devour him along with those two lords, that were yet a kindlier fate than all alone to abide those things he wist of on the Maruna, put on the rope, and after commending himself to the protection of his gods, followed Lord Brandok Dahar down the rotten slopes of rock and frozen earth at the head of a gully leading down the cliff. For all that they were early afoot, yet was it high noon ere they were off the rocks, for the peril of falling stones drove them out from the gully's bed, first unto the eastern buttress, and after, when that grew too sheer, back to the western wall. and in an hour or twain the gully's bed grew shallow, and it narrowed to an end, whence Brandok gazed between his feet to where, a few spears' length below, the smooth slabs curved downward out of sight, and the eye leapt straight from their clean-cut edge to shimmering tree-tops that showed tiny as mosses beyond the unseen gulf of air. So they rested a while, then returning a little up the gully, forced a way out onto the face, and made a hazardous traverse to a new gully westward of the first, and so at last plunged down a long fan of scree, and rested on soft fine turf at the foot of the cliffs. Little mountain gentians grew at their feet. The pathless forest lay like the sea below them. Before them the mountains of the Zia stood supreme, the white gables of his Lorgin, the lean dark finger of Tetrachnamfnant Shark lying back above the Zia Pass pointing to the sky, and west of it, jutting above the valley, the square bastion of Tetrachnamfnant Serm. The greater mountains were for the most part sunk behind this nearer range, but Kostra Belorn still towered above the pass. As a queen looking down from her high window, so she overlooked those green woods sleeping in the noonday, and on her forehead was beauty like a star. Behind them, where they sat, the escarpment reared back in cramped perspective, a pile of massive buttresses cleft with ravines, leading upward from that land of leaves and waters to the hidden wintry flats of the Maruna. That night they slept on the fell under the stars, and next day, going down into the woods, came at dusk to an open glade by the waters of the broad-bosomed Barvinan. The turf was like a cushion, a place for elves to dance in. The far bank, full half a mile away, was wooded to the water with silver birches, dainty as mountain nymphs, their limbs gleaming through the twilight, their reflections quivering in the depths of the mighty river. In the high air day lingered yet, a faint warmth tinging the great outlines of the mountains, and westward up the river the young moon stooped above the trees. East of the glade a little wooded eminence, no higher than a house, ran back from the river bank, and in its shoulder a hollow cave. "How smiles it to thee?" said Juss. "Be sure we shall find no better place than this thou seest to dwell in until the snows melt and we may on. For though it be summer all the year round in this fortunate valley, it is winter on the great hills, and until the spring we were mad to essay our enterprise." "Why then," said Brandok, "turn we shepherds awhile. Thou shalt pipe to me, and I'll foot thee measures shall make the dryads think they ne'er went to school, and Mivosh shall be a goat-foot god to chase them. For to tell thee truth, country wenches are long grown tedious to me. Oh, 'tis a sweet life! But ere we fall to it, bethink thee, O Juss, time marcheth and the world waggeth. What goeth forward in Demonland till summer be come and we home again?" "Also my heart is heavy because of my brother Spitfire," said Juss. "Oh, 'twas an ill storm and ill delays." "Away with vain regrettings," said Lord Brandok. "For thy sake and thy brother's fared I on this journey, and it is known to thee that never yet stretched I out mine hand upon aught that I have not taken it, and had my will of it." So they made their dwelling in that cave beside deep eddying Barvinan, and before that cave they ate their Yule feast, the strangest they had eaten all the days of their lives, seated, not as of old, on their high seats of ruby or of opal, but on mossy banks where daisies slept and creeping thyme, lighted not by the charmed escarbuncle of the high presence-chamber in Galing, but by the shifting beams of a brushwood fire that shone not on those pillars crowned with monsters that were the wonder of the world, but on the mightier pillars of the sleeping beechwoods. And in place of that feigned heaven of jewels self-effulgent beneath the golden canopy at Galing, they ate pavilioned under a charmed summer night, where the great stars of winter, Orion, Sirius, and the little dog, were raised up near the zenith, yielding their known courses in the southern sky to Canopus and the strange stars of the south. When the trees spake, it was not with their winter voice of bare boughs creaking, but with whisper of leaves and beetles droning in the fragrant air. The bushes were white with blossom, not with hoarfrost, and the dim white patches under the trees were not snow, but wild lilies and wood anemones sleeping in the night. All the creatures of the forest came to that feast, for they were without fear, having never looked upon the face of man. Little tree-apes, and popinjays, and titmouses, and coal-mouses, and wrens, and gentle round-eyed lemurs, and rabbits, and badgers, and dormice, and pied squirrels, and beavers from the streams, and storks and ravens and bustards, and wombats, and the spider-monkey with her baby at her breast. All these came to gaze with curious eye upon those travellers, and not these alone, but fierce beasts of the woods and wildernesses, the wild buffalo, the wolf, the tiger with monstrous paws, the bear, the fiery-eyed unicorn, the elephant, the lion and she-lion in their majesty, came to behold them in the firelight in that quiet glade. "It seems we hold court in the woods tonight," said Lord Brandok-the-Ha. "It is very pleasant. Yet hold thee ready with me to put some firebrands amongst 'em, if need befall. 'Tis likely some of these great beasts are little schooled in court ceremonies." Juss answered, "An thou lovest me, do no such thing. There lieth this curse upon all this land of the Barvinan, that whoso, whether he be man or beast, slayeth in this land or doeth here any deed of violence, there cometh down a curse upon him that in that instant must destroy and blast him for ever off the face of the earth. Therefore it was I took away from Mivarsh his bow and arrows when we came down from Ompren Edge, lest he should kill game for us, and so a worse thing befall him." Mivarsh hearkened not, but sat all a-quake, looking intently on a crocodile that came ponderously out upon the bank. And now he began to scream with terror, crying, "Save me! Let me fly! Give me my weapons! It was foretold me by a wise woman that a cocodrill serpent must devour me at last." Whereat the beasts drew back uneasily, and the crocodile, his small eyes wide, startled by Mivarsh's cries and violent gestures, lurched with what speed he might back into the water. Now in that place Lord Juss and Lord Brandok-the-Ha and Mivarsh Faz abode for 4 moons' space. Nothing they lacked of meat and drink, for the beasts of the forest, finding them well disposed, brought them of their store. Moreover, there came flying from the south, about the ending of the year, a martlet, which alighted in Juss's bosom, and said to him, "The gentle Queen Sophonisba, fosterling of the gods, had news of your coming, and because she knoweth you both mighty men of your hands and high of heart, therefore by me she sent you greeting." Juss said, "O little martlet, we would see thy queen face to face, and thank her." "Ye must thank her," said the bird, "in Costra Belorn." Brandok-the-Ha said, "That shall we fulfil. Thither only do our thoughts intend." "Your greatness," said the martlet, "must approve that word, and know that it is easier to lay under you all the world in arms than to ascend up a foot into that mountain." "Thy wings were too weak to lift me, else I'd borrow them," said Brandok-the-Ha. But the martlet answered, "Not the eagle that flieth against the sun may alight on Costra Belorn. No foot may tread her, save of those blessed ones to whom the gods gave leave ages ago, till they be come that the patient years await, men like unto the gods in beauty and in power, who of their own might and main, unholpen by magic arts, shall force a passage up to her silent snows." Brandok-the-Ha laughed. "Not the eagle," he cried, "but thou, little Flitterjack?" "Naught that hath feet," said the martlet. "I have none." The Lord Brandok-the-Ha took it tenderly in his hand and held it high in the air, looking to the high lands in the south. The birches swaying by the Barvinan were not more graceful, nor the distant mountain crags behind them more untamable to behold than he. "Fly to the Queen," he said, "and say thou spakest with Lord Juss beside the Barvinan, and with Lord Brandok-the-Ha of Demonland. Say unto her that we be they that were for to come, and that we, of our own might and main, ere spring be well turned summer, will come up to her in Costra Belorn, to thank her for her gracious sendings." Now when it was April, and the sun moving among the signs of heaven was about departing out of Aries and entering into Taurus, and the melting of the snows in the high mountains had swollen all the streams to spate, filling the mighty river so that he brimmed his banks and swept by like a tide race, Lord Juss said, "Now is the season propitious for our crossing of the flood of Barvinan and setting forth into the mountains." "Willingly," said Lord Brandok-the-Ha, "but shall's walk it, or swim it, or take to us wings? To me, that have many a time swum back and forth over Thunderfirth to whet mine appetite ere I break my fast, 'tis a small matter of this river stream, how so swift it runneth. But with our harness and weapons and all our gear, that were far other matter." "Is it for naught that we are grown friends with them that do inhabit these woods?" said Juss. "The crocodile shall bear us over Barvinan for the asking." "It is an ill fish," said Mivarsh, "and it sore dislikes me." "Then thou must here abide," said Brandok-the-Ha. "But be not dismayed, I will go with thee. The fish may bear us both at a draught and not founder." "It was a wise woman foretold it me," answered Mivarsh, "that such a kind of serpent must be my bane. Yet be it according to your will." So they whistled them up the crocodile, and first the Lord Juss fared over Barvinan, riding on the back of that serpent with all his gear and weapons of war, and landed several hundred paces downstream, for the stream was very strong. And thereafter the crocodile, returning to the north bank, took the Lord Brandok-the-Ha and Mivarsh Faz, and put them across in like manner. Mivarsh put on a gallant face, but rode as near the tail as might be, fingering certain herbs from his wallet that were good against serpents, his lips moving in urgent supplication to his gods. When they were come ashore, they thanked the crocodile and bade him farewell, and went their way swiftly through the woods, and Mivosh, as one new loosed from prison, went before them with a light step, singing and snapping his fingers. Now had they for 3 or 4 days a devious journey through the foothills, and thereafter made their dwelling for 40 days' space in the Zia valley above the gorges. Here the valley widens to a flat-floored amphitheatre, and lean limestone crags tower heavenward on every side. High in the south, couched above great grey moraines, the Zia glacier, wrinkle-backed like some dragon survived out of the elder chaos, thrusts his snout into the valley. Here, out of his caves of ice, the young river thunders, casting up a spray where rainbows hover in bright weather. The air blows sharp from the glacier, and alpine flowers and shrubs feed on the sunlight. Here they gathered them good store of food, and every morning they were afoot before the sunrise, to ascend the mountains and make sure their practice, ere they should attempt the greater peaks. So they explored all the spurs of Tetrachnamph and Islagin, and those peaks themselves, the rock peaks of the lower Nuanu range overlooking Barvinan, the snow peaks of Islagan, Avsek, Kiemsur, Mersu, Berchnogin, and Borch Meheftarsk, loftiest of the range by all his ridges, dwelling a week on the moraines of the Meheftarsk glacier above the upland valley of Foana, and westward the Dolomite group of Burjazarshra and the great wall of Shilak. Now were their muscles by these exercises grown like bands of iron, and they hardy as mountain bears and sure of foot as mountain goats. So on the 9th day of May they crossed the Zia Pass, and camped on the rocks under the south wall of Tetrachnamph Shark. The sun went down, like blood in a cloudless sky. On either hand and before them, the snow stretched blue and silent. The air of those high snowfields was bitter cold. A league and more to the south a line of black cliffs bounded the glacier basin. Over that black wall, 12 miles away, Kostra Bellorn and Kostra Pivracha towered against an opal heaven. While they supped in the fading light, Just said, "The wall thou seest is called the Barriers of Emshir. Though over it lieth the straight way to Kostra Pivracha, yet it is not our way, but an ill way. For, first, that barrier hath till now been held unclimbable, and so proven even by half-gods that alone essayed it." "I await not thy second reason," said Brandok Dahar. "Thou hast had thy way until now, and now thou shalt give me mine in this, to come with me tomorrow and show how thou and I make of such barriers a puff of smoke, if they stand in the path between us and our fixed ends." "Were it only this," answered Just, "I would not gainsay thee. But not senseless rocks alone are we set to deal with if we take this road. Seest thou where the barriers end in the east against yonder monstrous pyramid of tumbled crags and hanging glaciers that shuts out our prospect east away? Menksur men call it, but in heaven it hath a more dreadful name, Elemantisera, which is to say, the bed of the manticores. O Brandok Dahar, I will climb with thee what unscaled cliff thou list, and I will fight with thee against the most grisfullest beasts that ever grazed by the Tartarian streams. But both these things in one moment of time, that were a rash part and a foolish." But Brandok Dahar laughed and answered him, "To naught else may I liken thee, O Just, but to the sparrow camel, to whom they said, 'Fly,' and it answered, 'I cannot, for I am a camel,' and when they said, 'Carry,' it answered, 'I cannot, for I am a bird.'" "Wilt thou egg me on so much?" said Just. "Aye," said Brandok Dahar, "if thou wilt be assish." "Wilt thou quarrel?" said Just. "Thou knowest me," said Brandok Dahar. "Well," said Just, "thy counsel hath been right once and saved us, for 9 times that it hath been wrong, and my counsel saved thee from an evil end. If ill behap us, it shall be set down that it had from thy peevish will original." And they wrapped them in their cloaks and slept. On the morrow they rose betimes, and set forth south across the snows that were crisp and hard from the frosts of the night. The barriers, as it were but a stone's throw removed, stood black before them. Starlight swallowed up size and distance that showed only by walking, as still they walked, and still that wall seemed no nearer nor no larger. Twice and thrice they dipped into a valley, or crossed a raised-up fold of the glacier, till they stood at break of day below the smooth blank wall frozen and bleak, with never a ledge in sight great enough to bear snow, barring their passage southward. They halted, and ate, and scanned the wall before them, and ill to do with it seemed. So they searched for an ascent, and found at last a spot where the glacier swelled higher, a mile or less from the western shoulder of Elemantisera. Here the cliff was but 400 or 500 feet high, yet smooth enow and ill enow to look on, yet their likeliest choice. Some while it was ere they might get a footing on that wall. But at length Brandok the Har, standing on Juss's shoulder, found him a hold where no hold showed from below, and with great travail fought a passage up the rocks to a stance some 100 feet above them, whence, sitting sure on a broad ledge great enough to hold 6 or 7 folk at a time, he played up Lord Juss on the rope, and after him Mivarch. An hour and a half it cost them for that short climb. "The north-east buttress of Ill Stack was children's gruel to this," said Lord Juss. "There's more aloft," said Lord Brandok the Har, lying back against the precipice, his hands clasped behind his head, his feet a-dangle over the ledge. "In thine ear, Juss, I would not go first on the rope again on such a pitch for all the wealth of Impland." "Wilt repent and return?" said Juss. "If thou'lt be last down," he answered. "If not, I'd liever risk what waits untried above us. If it prove worse, I am confirmed atheist." Lord Juss leaned out, holding by the rock with his right hand, scanning the wall beside and above them. An instant he hung so, then drew back. His square jaw was set, and his teeth glinted under his dark moustachios something fiercely, as a thunder beam betwixt dark sky and sea in a night of thunder. His nostrils widened, as of a war-horse at the call of battle. His eyes were like the violet levin brand, and all his body hardened like a bowstring drawn as he grasped his sharp sword and pulled it forth grating and singing from its sheath. Brandok the Har sprang a foot and drew his sword, Zeldonius's loom. "What stirreth?" he cried. "Thou lookst ghastly. That look thou hadst when thou tookest the helm, and our prows swung westward toward Cartadza Sound, and the fate of Demonland and all the world beside hung in thine hand for weal or bliss." "There's little sword room," said Juss, and again he looked eastward and upward along the cliff. Brandok the Har looked over his shoulder. Mivarch took his bow and set an arrow on the string. "It hath scented us down the wind," said Brandok the Har. Small time was there to ponder. Swinging from hold to hold across the dizzy precipice, as an ape swingeth from bough to bough, the beast drew near. The shape of it was as a lion, but bigger and taller, the colour a dull red, and it had prickles lancing out behind as of a porcupine. Its face a man's face, if aught so hideous might be conceived of humankind, with staring eyeballs, low wrinkled brow, elephant ears, some wispy mangy likeness of a lion's mane, huge bony chaps, brown blood-stained gubbert tushes grinning betwixt bristly lips. Straight for the ledge it made, and as they braced them to receive it, with a great swing heaved a man's height above them, and leapt down upon their ledge from aloft betwixt Juss and Brandok the Har ere they were well aware of its changed course. Brandok the Har smote at it a great swashing blow, and cut off its scorpion tail. But it clawed Juss's shoulder, smote down Mivarch, and charged like a lion upon Brandok the Har, who, missing his footing on the narrow edge of rock, fell backwards a great fall, clear of the cliff, down to the snow 100 feet beneath them. As it craned over, minded to follow and make an end of him, Juss smote it in the hinder parts and on the ham, shearing away the flesh from the thigh-bone, and his sword came with a clank against the brazen claws of its foot. So with a horrid bellow it turned on Juss, rearing like a horse, and it was 3 heads greater than a tall man in stature when it reared aloft, and the breadth of its chest like the chest of a bear. The stench of its breath choked Juss's mouth, and his senses sickened, but he slashed it athwart the belly, a great round-armed blow, cutting open its belly so that the guts fell out. Again he hewed at it, but missed, and his sword came against the rock and was shivered into pieces. So when that noisome vermin fell forward on him, roaring like 1,000 lions, Juss grappled with it, running in beneath its body, and clasping it, and thrusting his arms into its inward parts, to rip out its vitals if so he might. So close he grappled it that it might not reach him with its murthering teeth, but its claws sliced off the flesh from his left knee downward to the ankle bone, and it fell on him and crushed him on the rock, breaking in the bones of his breast. And Juss, for all his bitter pain and torment, and for all he was well-nigh stifled by the sore stink of the creature's breath, and the stink of its blood and puddings blubbering about his face and breast, yet by his great strength wrestled with that fell and filthy man-eater, and ever he thrust his right hand, armed with the hilt and stump of his broken sword, yet deeper into its belly, until he searched out its heart and did his will upon it, slicing the heart asunder like a lemon, and severing and tearing all the great vessels about the heart, until the blood gushed about him like a spring. And like a caterpillar the beast curled up and straightened out in its death spasms, and it rolled and fell from the ledge, a great fall, and lay by Brandok the Har, the foulest beside the fairest of all earthly beings, reddening the pure snow with its blood. And the spines that grew on the hinder parts of the beast went out and in like the sting of a new dead wasp that goes out and in continually. It fell not clean to the snow, as by the care of heaven was fallen Brandok the Har, but smote an edge of rock near the bottom, and that strook out its brains. There it lay in its blood, gaping to the sky. Now was Just stretched face downward, as one dead, on that giddy edge of rock. Mivage had saved him, seizing him by the foot and drawing him back to safety when the beast fell. A sight of terror he was, clotted from head to toe with the beast's blood and his own. Mivage bound his wounds and laid him tenderly as he might back against the cliff, then peered down a long while to know if the beast were dead indeed. When he had gazed down earnestly so long that his eyes watered with the strain, and still the beast stirred not, Mivage prostrated himself, and made supplication, saying aloud, O Schlimpfli, Schlamfi, and Shebamri, gods of my father and my father's fathers, have pity of your child, if, as I dearly trow, your power extendeth over this far and forbidden country, no less than over Impland, where your child ever worshipped you in your holy place, and taught my sons and daughters to revere your holy names, and made an altar in mine house, pointed by the stars in manner ordained from of old, and offered up my seventh-born son, and was minded to offer up my seventh-born daughter thereon, in meekness and righteousness, according to your holy will. But this I might not do, since you vouchsafed me not a seventh daughter, but 6 only. Wherefore I beseech you, of your holy name's sake, strengthen my hand to let down this my companion safely by the rope, and thereafter bring me safely down from this rock, howsoever he be a devil and an unbeliever. Oh, save his life, save both their lives, for I am sure that if these be not saved alive, never shall your child return, but in this far land starve and die like an insect that dureth but for a day. So prayed Mivage, and belike the high gods were moved to pity of his innocence, hearing him so cry for help unto his mumbo-jumbos, where no help was, and belike they were not minded that those lords of Demonland should there die evilly before their time, unhonoured, unsung. Howsoever, Mivage arose and made fast the rope about Lord Just, knotting it cunningly beneath the arms that it might not tighten in the lowering, and crush his breast and ribs, and so, with much ado, lowered him down to the foot of the cliff. Thereafter came Mivage himself down that perilous wall, and albeit for many a time he thought his bane was upon him, yet by good cragsmanship, spurred by cold necessity, he gat him down at last. Being down, he delayed not to minister to his companions, who came to themselves with heavy groaning. But when Lord Just was come to himself, he did his healing o't, both on himself and on Lord Brandok Dahar, so that in a while they were able to stand upon their feet, albeit something stiff and weary and like to vomit, and it was by then the 3rd hour past noon. While they rested, beholding where the beast Manticora lay in his blood, Just spake and said, It is to be said of thee, O Brandok Dahar, that thou to-day hast done both the worst and the best. The worst when thou wast so stubborn set to fare upon this climb, which hath come within a little of spilling both thee and me. The best, when as thou didst smite off his tail. Was that by policy or by chance? Why, said he, I was never so poor a man of my hands that I need turn braggart. 'Twas handiest to my sword, and it disliked me to see it wagging. Did aught lie on it? The sting of his tail, answered Just, were competent for thine or my destruction, and it grazed but our little finger. Thou speakest like a book, said Brandok Dahar. Else might I scarce know thee for my noble friend, being bewrayed with blood as a buffalo with mire. Be not angry with me, if I am most at ease to windward of thee. Just laughed. If thou be not too nice, he said, go to the beast and dabble thyself too with the blood of his bowels. Nay, I mock not, it is most needful. These be enemies not of mankind only, but each of other, walking every one by himself, loathing every one his kind, living or dead, so that in all the world there abideth naught loathlier unto them than the blood of their own kind, the least smell whereof they do abhor as a mad dog abhorreth water, and 'tis a clinging smell. So are we after this encounter most sure against them. That night they camped at the foot of a spur of Avsec, and set forth at dawn down the long valley eastward. All day they heard the roaring of manticores from the desolate flanks of Elementisera, that showed now no longer as a pyramid, but as a long-backed screen, making the southern rampart of that valley. It was ill going, and they somewhat shaken. Day was nigh gone, when beyond the eastern slopes of Ella they came where the white waters of the river they followed thundered together with a black water rushing down from the southwest. Below, the river ran east in a wide valley, dropping afar to tree-clad depths. In the fork above the water's meet, the rocks enclosed a high green knoll, like some fragment of a kindlier clime that overlived into an age of ruin. Here, too, said Just, my dream walked with me. And if it be ill crossing there, where this stream breaketh into a dozen branching cataracts a little above the water's meet, yet well I think 'tis our only crossing. So, ere the light should fade, they crossed that perilous edge above the waterfalls, and slept on the green knoll. That knoll just named Throstlegarth, after a thrush that waked them next morning, singing in a little wind-stunted mountain thorn that grew among the rocks. Strangely sounded that homely song on the cold mountainside, under the unhallowed heights of Ella, close to the confines of those enchanted snows which guard Costra Bellhorn. No sight of the high mountains had they from Throstlegarth, nor for a long while from the bed of that straight, steep glen of the black waters up which now their journey lay. Rugged spurs and buttresses shut them in. High on the left bank above the cataracts they made their way, buffeted by the wind that leaped and charged among the crags, their ears sated with the roaring sound of waters, their eyes filled with the spray blown upward, and Mivosh followed after them. Silent they fared, for the way was steep, and in such a wind and such a noise of torrents a man must shout lustily if he would be heard. Very desolate was that valley, having a dark aspect and a ghastful, such as a man might look for in the infernal glens of Pirith-Legathon or Acheron. No living thing they saw, save at whiles high above them an eagle sailing down the wind, and once a beast's form running in the hollow mountain-side. This stood at gaze, lifting up its foul human platter face, with glittering eyes bloody and great as saucers, scented its fellow's blood, started, and fled among the crags. So fared they for the space of 3 hours, and so, coming suddenly round a shoulder of the hill, stood on the upper threshold of that glen at the gates of a flat upland valley. Here they beheld a sight to darken all earth's glories, and strike dumb all her singers with its grandeur. Framed in the crags of the hillsides, canopied by blue heaven, Kostra Pivracha stood before them. So huge he was that even here at 6 miles' distance the eye might not at a glance behold him, but must sweep back and forth as over a broad landscape, from the ponderous roots of the mountain, where they sprang black and sheer from the glacier, up the vast face, where buttress was piled upon buttress, and tower upon tower, in a blinding radiance of ice-hung precipice and snow-filled gully, to the lone heights, where, like spears menacing high heaven, the white teeth of the summit ridge cleft the sky. From right to left he filled nigh a quarter of the heavens, from the graceful peak of Eilinon looking over his western shoulder, to where on the east the snowy slopes of Jalchi shut in the prospect, hiding Kostra Bellhorn. They camped that evening on the left moraine of the high glacier of Temorm. Long spidery streamers of cloud, filmy as the gauze of a lady's veil, blew eastward from the spires on the ridge, signs of wild weather aloft. Just said, glassy clear is the air. That forerunneth not fair weather. Well, time shall wait for us, if need be, said Brandok the Har. So mightily my desire crieth unto me from those horns of ice, that, having once looked on them, I had as lief die as leave them unclimbed. But of thee, O Jus, I make some marvel. Thou wast bidden inquire in Kostra Bellhorn, and sure she were easier won than Kostra Pivracha, going behind Jalchi by the snow-fields, and so avoiding her great western cliffs. There is a saw in Impland, answered Jus, ware of a tall wife. Even so there lieth a curse on any that shall attempt Kostra Bellhorn, that hath not first looked down upon her, and he shall have his death, or ever he have his will. And from one point only of earth may a man look down on Kostra Bellhorn, and 'tis from yonder unascended tooth of ice, where thou seest the last beam burn. For that is the topmost pinnacle of Kostra Pivracha, and it is the highest point of the stablished earth. They were silent a minute's space. Then Jus spake, Thou wast ever greatest amongst us as a mountaineer. Which way likes thee best for our climbing up him? O Jus, said Brandok the Har, on ice and snow thou art my master. Therefore give me thy rede. For mine own choice and pleasure I have settled it this hour or more, namely to ascend into the gap between the two mountains, and thence turn westward up the east ridge of Pivracha. It is the fearsomest climb to look on, said Jus, and belike the grandest, and for both counts I had wagered it thy choice. That gap hight the gates of Zimiamvia, and the Kostra glacier that runneth up to it lieth under the weird I told thee of. It were our death to adventure there, ere we had looked down upon Kostra Bellhorn, which done the charm is broke for us, and from that time forth it needeth but our own might and skill, and a high heart, to accomplish whatsoever we desire. Why then the great north buttress? Cried Brandok the Har. So shall she not behold us as we climb, until we come forth on the highest tooth and overlook her and tame her to our will. So they supped and slept, but the wind cried among the crags all night long, and in the morning snow and sleet blotted out the mountains. All day the storm held, and in a lull they struck camp and came down again to Throstlegarth, and there abode 9 days and 9 nights, in wind and rain and battering hail. On the 10th day the weather abated. and they went up and crossed the glacier, and lodged them in a cave in the rock at the foot of the great north buttress of Kostrupivracha. At dawn, Juss and Brandok Dahar went forth to survey the prospect. They crossed the mouth of the steep snow-choked valley that ran up to the main ridge betwixt Ashnilan on the west and Kostrupivracha on the east, rounded the base of Eilinon, and climbed from the west to a snow-saddle some 3,000 feet up the ridge of the mountain, whence they might view the buttress and choose their way for their attempt. "'Tis a 2 days' journey to the top," said Lord Brandok Dahar. "If night on the ridge freeze us not to death, I dread no other hindrance. That black rib that riseth 1/2 a mile above our camp shall take us clean up to the crest of the buttress, striking it above the great tower at the northern end. If the rocks be like those we camped on, hard as diamond and rough as a sponge, they shall not fail us but by our own neglect. As I live, I ne'er saw their like for climbing." "So far, well," said Juss. "Above," said Brandok Dahar, "I'd drive thee a chariot until we come to the first great kick of the ridge. That must we round, or ne'er go further, and on this side it showeth ill enough, for the rocks shelve outward. If they be iced, there's work indeed. Beyond that I'll prophesy naught, O Juss, for I can see naught clear, save that the ridge is hacked into clefts and steeples. How we may overcome them must be put to the proof. It is too high and too far to know. This only, where we would go, there have we gone until now. And by that ridge lieth, if any way there lieth, the way to this mountain top that we cross the world to climb." Next day, with the first paling of the skies, they arose all three, and set forth southward over the crisp snows. They roped at the foot of the glacier that came down from the saddle, some 5,000 feet above them, where the main ridge dips between Ashnilan and Kostrupivracha. Ere the brighter stars were swallowed in the light of morning, they were cutting their way among the labyrinthine towers and chasms of the icefall. Soon the new daylight flooded the snowfields of the high glacier of Temorn, dyeing them green and saffron and palest rose. The snows of Islargin glowed far away in the north, to the right of the white dome of Emshir. Elemantisera blocked the view northeastward. The buttress that bounded their valley on the east plunged it in shadow blue as a summer sea. High on the other side, the great twin peaks of Eilinon and Ashnilan, roused by the warm beams out of their frozen silence of the night, growled at whiles with avalanches and falling stones. Juss was their leader in the icefall, guiding them now along high knife edges that fell away on either hand to unsounded depths, now within the very lips of those chasms, along the bases of the ice towers. These, 5 times a man's height, some square, some pinnacled, some shattered or piled with the ruins of their kind, leaned above the path, as ready to fall and overwhelm the climbers, and dash their bones for ever down to those blue-green secret places of frost and silence, where the chips of ice chinked hollow as Juss pressed onward, cutting his steps with Mivarsh's axe. At length the slope eased, and they walked out on the unbroken surface of the glacier, and passing by a snow bridge over the great rift betwixt the glacier and the mountain-side, came 2 hours before noon to the foot of the rock rib that they had scanned from Eilinon. Now was Brandok Dahar to lead them. They climbed face to the rock, slowly and without rest, for sound and firm as the rocks were, the holes were small and few, and the cliffs steep. Here and there a chimney gave them passage upward, but the climb was mainly by cracks and open faces of rock, a trial of main strength and endurance such as few might sustain for a short while only, but this wall was 3,000 feet in height. By noon they gained the crest, and there rested on the rocks too weary to speak, looking across the avalanche-swept face of Kostrupivracha to the corniced parapet that ended against the western precipices of Kostrubelorn. For some way the ridge of the buttress was broad and level, then it narrowed suddenly to the width of a horse's back, and sprang skyward 2,000 feet and more. Brandok Dahar went forward and climbed a few feet up the cliff. It bulged out above him, smooth and holdless. He tried it once and again, then came down, saying, "Naught without wings." Then he went to the left. Here hanging glaciers overlooked the face from on high, and while he gazed an avalanche of ice blocks roared down it. Then he went to the right, and here the rocks sloped outward, and the sloping ledges were piled with rubbish, and the rocks rotten and slippery with snow and ice. So having gone a little way he returned, and, "O Juss," he said, "wilt take it right forth, and that must be by flying, for hold there is none? Or wilt go east and dodge the avalanche? Or west, where all is rotten and slither, and a slip were our destruction?" So they debated, and at length decided on the eastern road. It was an ill step round the jutting corner of that tower, for little hold there was, and the rocks were undercut below, so that a stone or a man loosed from that place must fall clear at a bound 3,000 or 4,000 feet to the Kostra glacier, and there be dashed in pieces. Beyond, wide ledges gave them passage along the wall of the tower, that now swept inward, facing south. Far overhead, dazzling white in the sunshine, the broken glacier edges and splinters jutted against the blue, and icicles greater than a man hung glittering from every ledge. A sight heavenly fair, whereof they yet had little joy, hastening as they had not hastened in their lives before to be out of the danger of that ice-swept face. Suddenly was a noise above them like the crack of a giant whip, and looking up they beheld against the sky a dark mass which opened like a flower and spread into 100 fragments. The demons and Mivage hugged the cliffs where they stood, but there was little cover. All the air was filled with the shrieking of the stones as they swept downwards like fiends returning to the pit, and with the crash of them as they dashed against the cliffs and burst in pieces. The echoes rolled and reverberated from cliff to distant cliff, and the limbs of the mountain seemed to writhe as under a scourge. When it was done, Mivage was groaning for pain of his left wrist, sore hurt with the stone. The others were scatheless. Just said to Brandok Dahar, "Back, howsoever it dislike thee." Back they went, and an avalanche of ice crashed down the face which must have destroyed them had they proceeded. "Thou dost misjudge me," said Brandok Dahar, laughing. "Give me where my life lieth on mine own might and main, then is danger meat and drink to me, and naught shall turn me back. But here on this cursed cliff, on the ledges whereof a cripple might walk at ease, we be the toys of chance, and it were pure folly to abide upon it a moment longer." "Two ways be left to us," said Juss. "To turn back, and that were our shame for ever, and to essay the western traverse." "And that should be the bane of any save of me and thee," said Brandok Dahar, "and if our bane, why, we shall sleep sound." "Mivage," said Juss, "is not so bounden to this adventure. He hath bravely held by us, and bravely stood our friend. Yet here we be come to such a pass, I sore misdoubt me if it were less danger of his life to come with us than seek safety alone." But Mivage put on a hardy face. Never a word he spake, but nodded his head, as who should say, "Forward." "First I must be thy leech," said Juss, and he bound up Mivage's wrist. And because the day was now far spent, they camped under the great tower, hoping next day to reach the top of Kostrapivracha, that stood unseen some 6,000 feet above them. Next morning, when it was light enough to climb, they set forth. For 2 hours' space on that traverse not a moment passed but they were in instant peril of death. They were not roped, for on those slabbery rocks one man had dragged a dozen to perdition had he made a slip. The ledges sloped outward. They were piled with broken rock and mud. The soft red rock broke away at a hand's touch, and plunged at a leap to the glacier below. Down and up and along, and down and up again, they wound their way, rounding the base of that great tower, and came at last by a rotten gully, safe to the ridge above it. While they climbed, white wispy clouds which had gathered in the high gullies of Eilinon in the morning had grown to a mass of blackness that hid all the mountains to the west. Great streamers ran from it across the gulf below, joined and boiled upward, lifting and sinking like a full-tided sea, rising at last to the high ridge where the demons stood, and wrapping them in a cloak of vapour with a chill wind in its folds, and darkness in broad noonday. They halted, for they might not see the rocks before them. The wind grew boisterous, shouting among the splintered towers. Snow swept powdery and keen across the ridge. The cloud lifted and plunged again like some great bird shadowing them with its wings. From its bosom the lightning flared above and below. Thunder crashed on the heels of the lightning, sending the echoes rolling among the distant cliffs. Their weapons, planted in the snow, sizzled with blue flame. Juss had counselled laying them aside, lest they should perish holding them. Crouched in a hollow of the snow among the rocks of that high ridge of Kostrapivracha, Lord Juss and Lord Brandok Dahar and Mivage Faz weathered that night of terror. When night came they knew not, for the storm brought darkness on them hours before sundown. Blinding snow and sleet and fire and thunder, and wild winds shrieking in the gullies till the firm mountain seemed to rock, kept them awake. They were near frozen, and scarce desired aught but death, which might bring them ease from that hellish roundelay. Day broke with a weak grey light, and the storm died down. Juss stood up weary beyond speech. Mivage said, "Ye be devils, but of myself I marvel, for I have dwelt by snow mountains all my days, and many I wot of that have been benighted on the snows in wild weather, and not one but was starved by reason of the cold. I speak of them that were found. Many were not found, for the spirits devoured them." Whereat Lord Brandok Dahar laughed aloud, saying, "O Mivage, I fear me that in thee I have but a graceless dog. Look on him, that in hardihood and bodily endurance against all hardships of frost or fire surpasseth me as greatly as I surpass thee, yet is he weariest of the three. Wouldst know why? I'll tell thee. All night he hath striven against the cold, chafing not himself only, but me and thee to save us from frostbite, and be sure naught else had saved thy carcass. By then was the mist grown lighter, so that they might see the ridge for 100 paces or more, where it went up before them, each pinnacle standing out shadowy and unsubstantial against the next succeeding one more shadowy still, and the pinnacles showed monstrous huge through the mist, like mountain peaks in stature. They roped and set forth, scaling the towers or turning them, now on this side, now on that, sometimes standing on teeth of rock that seemed cut off from all earth else, solitary in a sea of shifting vapour, sometimes descending into a deep gash in the ridge, with a blank wall rearing aloft on the further side, and empty air yawning to left and right. The rocks were firm and good, like those they had first climbed from the glacier, but they went but a slow pace, for the climbing was difficult and made dangerous by new snow and by the ice that glazed the rocks. As the day wore, the wind was fallen, and all was still when they stood at length before a ridge of hard ice that shot steeply up before them like the edge of a sword. The east side of it on their left was almost sheer, ending in a blank precipice that dropped out of sight without a break. The western slope, scarcely less steep, ran down in a white even sheet of frozen snow till the clouds engulfed it. Brandok Dahar waited on the last blunt tooth of rock at the foot of the ice ridge. "The rest is thine," he cried to Lord Juss. "I would not that any save thou should tread him first, for he is thy mountain." "Without thee I had never won up hither," answered Juss, "and it is not fitting that I should have that glory to stand first upon the peak, when thine was the main achievement. Go thou before." "I will not," said Lord Brandok Dahar, "and it is not so." So Juss went forward, smiting with his axe great steps just below the backbone of the ridge on the western side, and Lord Brandok Dahar and Mivarsh Faz followed in the steps. Presently a wind arose in the unseen spaces of the sky, and tore the mist like a rotten garment. Spears of sunlight blazed through the rifts. Distant sunny lands shimmered in the unimaginable depths to the southward, seen over the crest of a tremendous wall that stood beyond the abyss, a screen of black rock buttresses seamed with 1,000 gullies of glistening snow, and crowned as with battlements with a row of mountain peaks, savage and fierce of form, that made the eye blink for their brightness, the lean spires of the summit ridge of Kostrupivracha. These, that the demons had so long looked up to as in a distant heaven, now lay beneath their feet. Only the peak they climbed still reared itself above them, clear now and near to view, showing a bare beetling cliff on the northeast, overhung by a cornice of snow. Juss marked the cornice, turned him again to his step-cutting, and in half an hour from the breaking of the clouds stood on that unascended pinnacle, with all earth beneath him. They went down a few feet on the southern side, and sat on some rocks. A fair lake studded with islands lay bosomed in wooded and crag-girt hills at the foot of a deep-cut valley which ran down from the gates of Ximiambia. Eilinon and Ashnilam rose near by in the west, with the delicate white peak of Acra Garsh showing between them. Beyond mountain like the sea. Juss looked southward, where the blue land stretched in fold upon fold of rolling country, soft and misty, till it melted in the sky. "Thou and I," said he, "first of the children of men, now behold with living eyes the fabled land of Ximiambia. Is that true, thinkest thou, which philosophers tell us of that fortunate land, that no mortal foot may tread it, but the blessed souls do inhabit it, of the dead that be departed, even they that were great upon earth and did great deeds when they were living, that scorned not earth and the delights and the glories thereof, and yet did justly, and were not dastards nor yet oppressors?" "Who knoweth?" said Brandok Dahar, resting his chin in his hand and gazing south as in a dream. "Who shall say he knoweth?" They were silent a while. Then Juss spake, saying, "If thou and I come thither at last, O my friend, shall we remember Demonland?" And when he answered him not, Juss said, "I had rather row on Moonmere under the stars of a summer's night than be a king of all the land of Ximiambia. And I had rather watch the sunrise on the Scarf than dwell in gladness all my days on an island of that enchanted lake of Ravari under Kostrubelorn." Now the curtain of cloud that had hung till now about the eastern heights was rent into shreds, and Kostrubelorn stood like a maiden before them, 2 or 3 miles eastward, facing the slanting rays of the sun. On all her vast precipices scarce a rock showed bare, so encrusted were they with a dazzling robe of snow. More lovely she seemed and more graceful in her airy poise than they had yet beheld her. Juss and Brandok Dahar rose up, as men arise to greet a queen in her majesty. In silence they looked on her for some minutes. Then Bran Doctor spake, saying, Behold thy bride, O Juss. End of chapter 12.